Chapter 1705. Elder Yu narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction Yi Zhao was pointing. He was slightly stunned. In the distance, in the vast wilderness, there were countless messy and broken tombstones. Even though there was still some distance between them, they could still clearly feel the dense and cold aura of suppression from where they were standing. Oppressive. Heavy. Majestic. The air was filled with a desolate and thick smell of blood. It was frightening. "This is, the tombs of the exalted gods?" Elder Yu murmured. "Clan leader, do you mean?" Yi Zhao raised his chin. "No, look again." Elder Yu was stunned for a moment before he looked even further into the distance. Only then did he see that there seemed to be an unusual black color at the point where the sky and the earth met. "That's a wall?" Elder Yu widened his eyes. Hearing his words, Nan Yifan and the others immediately looked in that direction. However, their eyesight was not as good as Elder Yu's. They could not compare to Yi Zhao's, so they could only see a black line. However, Nan Yifan's face was still filled with shock. There was indeed a wall in the divine ruins world. Rumor had it that it appeared in the earth-shattering battle tens of thousands of years ago. It was said that the wall contained endless power and could separate heaven and earth. All the cultivators who participated in the battle back then died, and countless treasures were destroyed. Only this wall was strong and sturdy and had been preserved. Before this, Nan Yifan had only heard of the existence of this wall in rumors. He had never seen it before. Therefore, when he saw it from afar, he could not hide his excitement. However, Yi Zhao's next sentence made his heart turn cold. "They should be inside." The moment he said that, the surroundings fell silent. Inside? What inside? The few of them looked at each other blankly. They saw the confusion, suspicion, and disbelief in each other's eyes. Although Elder Yu was not as shocked as Nan Yifan and the others, he also frowned. "You're saying, they're inside that wall?" Yi Zhao nodded. "How is that possible?" Nan Yifan finally had no one to stop him from speaking. "Clan leader Yi Zhao, are you saying that they are behind that wall? How could a perfectly good wall contain people? Moreover, the reason why this wall was so famous was because it was exceptionally sturdy. Not only did it not collapse during the bloody battle back then, it even stood tenaciously between heaven and earth after experiencing tens of thousands of years of wind, frost, and rain. It would be difficult for an average person to even leave a hole in the wall, let alone others. Wasn't this too strange?" Yi Zhao didn't even look at him, as if he hadn't heard his question at all. He walked straight to the wall. Elder Yu immediately followed after him. However, the smile on his face had already disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a rare solemn and serious expression. Nan Yifan didn't get an answer, but he didn't have time to feel aggrieved. This was because he could tell that Yi Zhao and Yu Yuan seemed to be a little nervous. "I'm afraid things are going to get troublesome." Nan Yifan's heart also hung in the air. If the person Yi Zhao and the others were looking for was trapped in that wall, then would Yi and the others also? This thought made him feel a strong sense of uneasiness. He took a deep breath and waved at them. "Follow me." The tombs of the exalted god were silent. Yi Zhao and the others passed through in silence. The process was long and torturous. Moreover, the closer they got, the more they could feel the astonishing pressure and evil aura. The tombs of the exalted god should be in front. Elder Yu whispered. The wall was in the tombs of the exalted god. The further they went, the closer they got to the wall. Naturally, they could see it more clearly. Nan Yifan gritted his teeth and walked, staring straight at the black wall in front of him that was getting clearer. The wall was extremely tall and stood there quietly. He couldn't see the end of it on either side. He didn't know how long this wall was. Why hadn't he seen it before when he came here? Plop. A muffled voice came from behind. Nan Yifan turned around to look. One of the elders who came with him fell to the ground with a pale face. "Ma, Patriarch." Before he could finish his sentence, his chest shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The bloodstains were dark red, making his face look even more haggard and miserable. Nan Yifan's face darkened. An elder next to him couldn't help but say, "Patriarch, the evil aura on the wall is too terrifying. I'm afraid Elder Jinming can't hold on. And I'm afraid the rest of us will also." This wasn't an insult, but it was the truth. They knew each other's strength the best. They had already come this far, and no one wanted to stop here. If it wasn't for the fact that they had no other choice, they wouldn't have. Nan Yifan closed his eyes and said, "You and Elder Jinming stay here and wait. Don't go any further." The road ahead was dangerous, and he couldn't gamble with his elder's life. The two elders were hesitant at first, but in the end, they chose to nod and agree. They knew that they were at the end of their rope. If they forced themselves to follow, they would only be a burden. "Patriarch, you must be careful." Nan Yifan didn't delay for too long. He gave a few words of advice and turned to leave, continuing to follow Yi Zhao and Elder Jinming. They walked forward for a while more before finally arriving in front of the wall. Yi Zhao stopped in his tracks and stared fixedly ahead with a deep gaze. Elder Yu frowned. The situation was worse than he had expected. When Nan Yifan caught up, he immediately noticed the low pressure around the two. His heart sank as well. After waiting for a while, seeing that Yi Zhao and Elder Jinming still had no intention of speaking or taking action, Nan Yifan finally spoke hesitantly. "Patriarch Yi Zhao, are you sure that the person you're looking for is inside?" Elder Yu put his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "Patriarch Nan, your daughter and the others should be inside too." Nan Yifan was shocked. This. How did you? This wall can isolate all auras. Anyone who enters will lose contact with the outside world." A look of horror flashed across Nan Yifan's eyes. He really didn't know about this. He looked at the black wall in front of him again. It was tall, heavy, and majestic. After weathering the wind and frost, the wall was mottled, and the biting cold murderous aura kept gushing out from it, almost unbearable. They were still outside, but it was already so unbearable. If they really entered, wouldn't it be even more dangerous? "Then we have to get them out quickly," Nan Yifan said nervously. Elder Yu suddenly laughed, but there wasn't any smile on his face. He turned his head and glanced at Nan Yifan. "Patriarch Nan, do you know how many people have been trapped here for tens of thousands of years?" Nan Yifan looked at him, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Elder Yu said indifferently, "Not a single one." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1706. Not a single one. Nan Yifan's eyes widened. Didn't that mean that everyone who entered this place would die with no chance of survival? Then Yu Xing, Yi, and the others, Elder Yu, is what you said true? Nan Yifan had been through a lot in his life and was usually unperturbed even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. However, when he heard this, he panicked. It was very likely that his only two closest bloodlines were inside. If they really could never come out, then, Nan Yifan did not dare to continue thinking. He took a step forward and asked anxiously. "Clan leader Yi Zhao, you must have a way, right? If the people Yi Zhao was looking for were inside, he would definitely think of a way to bring them out. Perhaps he could also bring Yu Xing, Yi, and the others." "Step back," Yi Zhao suddenly said. Nan Yifan hurriedly did as he was told and looked at Yi Zhao expectantly. Elder Yu wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he did not say anything and took a few steps back. Yi Zhao raised his head and looked in front of him. Chi! A cluster of crimson gold flames suddenly appeared in his palm. A terrifying aura instantly descended upon the place. The temperature of the surrounding space also rose rapidly with the appearance of this flame. Nan Yifan's Adam's apple bobbed and his throat went dry. However, he did not dare to blink for fear that he would miss something. At the same time, he was also secretly shocked. Yi Zhao's attack was indeed extraordinary. His true realm and strength were obviously more shocking than the rumors. This also made Nan Yifan feel slightly more at ease. Yi Zhao was so powerful. Perhaps he could create a miracle. Buzz. The moment Yi Zhao attacked, the black wall in front of him immediately reacted. With this buzzing sound, a huge strange totem gradually gathered on the wall and appeared in front of Yi Zhao and the others. This. Whose totem is this? Why haven't I seen it before? An elder behind Nan Yifan could not help but murmur curiously. A totem that could appear here was obviously not ordinary. However, they all recognized the totem of the famous clans and sects in the world of divine ruins. None of them matched this one. Another elder pondered for a moment and guessed uncertainly. Perhaps it's the totem of some clan or sect that participated in that shocking battle tens of thousands of years ago? This was the most likely guess. Since that battle, countless experts had fallen, and even their families and sects had vanished without a trace in the long river of time. At that time, there weren't many forces that managed to survive. Things like totems were naturally even more obscure. Nan Yifan did not particularly care about this totem. All his attention was now on Yi. Now, he really was putting all his hope in Yi. As long as Yu Xing and Yi could come out safely, everything else. Crack. A faint sound came from the wall. Nan Yifan and the others perked up. Is it going to open? But their expectant faces looked as the huge totem on the black wall suddenly started to rotate slowly. That was where the sound came from. Almost at the same time, the flame in Yi Zhao's palm suddenly extinguished. Then, a gust of wind swept out. Yi Zhao was shocked, and his aura rose rapidly. In an instant, a gust of wind swept out. Dust flew everywhere. A tyrannical and terrifying force swept over. Yi Zhao was Yi Zhao after all. In the end, he still managed to stabilize his body in this terrifying storm. However, the ground beneath his feet had already cracked open several times. His feet had sunk half an inch into the ground. Elder Yu, who was at the back, suffered less of the impact, but he also managed to stand still in his position with difficulty. Nan Yifan and the rest were not in such a good situation. Their strength was inferior to Elder Yu's to begin with. Furthermore, they were not completely prepared when the accident occurred. Thus, their figures were sent flying just like that. However, they were all human powerhouses with rich combat experience after all. After suffering the initial loss, they reacted in time and tried their best to stabilize their bodies. But at this time, they had already retreated a distance away from the black wall. But this was not the most worrisome thing. Because Yi Zhao's situation did not look good. Although he was still standing on the spot and refused to retreat, as the totem on the black wall slowly rotated, the power erupting from it became more and more terrifying. Crack. The cracks in the ground under Yi Zhao's feet began to spread further away. Half of Nan Yifan's heart turned cold. Yi Zhao was the patriarch of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. If even he couldn't do it, then, wouldn't the people trapped inside really be hopeless? Nan Yi walked in the dark and winding space. 5 steps in front of her, a translucent figure was walking forward unhurriedly. The surroundings were deathly silent, and she could only hear her own footsteps. The man in front didn't speak, and she didn't dare to ask anything. She could only follow behind carefully. Fortunately, this man seemed to really know the way out. Along the way, their progress was very smooth. Not only did they not encounter any more danger, but the faintly discernible light in front of them seemed to be getting clearer and clearer. This gave Nan Yi hope. Perhaps, following this man would really be able to get out of here. Although she was also very worried about Big Brother and the rest, she could only care about herself now. After thinking about it, she finally decided to think of a way after getting out of here. Uncle Luo Yen was nowhere to be seen here, and his contact with her father had been cut off. She couldn't even ask for help. Nan Yi was thinking about it when she suddenly realized that the man in front of her had stopped. She thought that he wanted to confirm the direction, so she obediently stopped in her tracks and waited obediently. However, after a while, the person in front still didn't move. Nan Yi opened her mouth, wanting to ask about it. However, the sound of footsteps suddenly fell into her ears. There was someone. Nan Yi's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly looked over. On the side, a figure was slowly walking out from the darkness. Although the surroundings were dark, when that person walked closer, she could still vaguely see his appearance. As that person continued to approach, she could clearly feel that the surrounding atmosphere was rapidly becoming stiff and cold. The air seemed to be freezing inch by inch. A heavy and oppressive aura quickly spread. When she saw that person's face clearly, Nan Yi covered her mouth with one hand. At the same time, her eyes widened in shock. How could it be? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1707. What a coincidence. That person stood rooted to the ground and said indifferently, "I didn't expect to meet you here." Nan Yi's heart seemed to be gripped tightly by something. She was about to speak when she suddenly heard the man in front of her laugh and say, "It's a coincidence. You actually came here one day." Nan Yi was stunned. Only then did she realize that the other party's words were not meant for her. She furrowed her brows and glanced at the two of them with confusion and suspicion. They knew each other? That shouldn't be the case. She recognized the man in front of her. He was with Sheng Guanyu back then. He seemed to be some relative of Sheng Guanyu. Nan Yi wasn't shocked that he would appear here. At that time, everyone had been swallowed and entered this place. It was at most an accident and coincidence that they had met. But, how did he know this man who was with her? The latter had been locked up here for 1,000 years. The man in front of her continued. Actually, what surprised me even more is that you're still alive. His voice sounded very calm at first, but if one thought about it carefully, they would realize that he seemed to be suppressing something. Nan Yi couldn't describe this feeling. Sheng Guanjing smiled as well. I should be the one saying this to you. You're the one who's truly tough. You've been trapped here for so long, but you're still struggling at death's door. As soon as he finished speaking, Nan Yi suddenly felt a strong murderous intent. But this murderous intent only flashed past. By the time Nan Yi came to her senses, the cold and sinister feeling had already disappeared. It was as if everything was just her imagination. Sheng Guanjing's gaze swept past Nan Yi. His eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Looks like you helped him. Nan Yi, I'm afraid you still don't know what kind of person you helped, right? Nan Yi inexplicably felt guilty and nervous. She subconsciously glanced at the man in front of her. Why did his words sound so strange? Could it be that this man's identity was extraordinary, or was there something fishy? Sheng Guanjing, the feud between us has already been settled back then. Let's mind our own business now. You can do whatever you want, but don't stop me from leaving. Otherwise, I won't be polite. This was the first time Nan Yi had heard such threatening words from the man in front of her. Sheng Guanjing laughed out loud as if he had heard a joke. After a long while, he said, Yu Hongshan. What else can you do to me? Based on the fact that you don't even have a physical body and are just a remnant soul? How laughable. Back then, Yu Hongshan's strength had already been inferior to his, and he had only managed to fight him to a draw by relying on various schemes and tricks. After that fierce battle, Sheng Guanjing was wounded and went to the north of the untainted wilderness. Yu Hongshan, on the other hand, was swallowed into the space of the black wall and could not come out for 1,000 years. In fact, neither of them had expected the other to be able to survive until now. Even more so, they didn't expect to meet each other here. Yu Hongshan's aura surged. Clearly, he was enraged. His voice was cold. "Shangguan Jing, do you think I'm still the old me?" As soon as he finished speaking, a majestic aura burst out from his body. Shangguan Jing narrowed his eyes and smiled. "I was wondering why you were so arrogant. It turns out that you've broken through to become a god." This was indeed rare. It was almost impossible to break through from a high god to a god without a physical body. No wonder he was so arrogant. It was obvious that Yu Hongshan had put in a lot of effort in this aspect over the past 1,000 years. Or perhaps, he had encountered some fortuitous opportunity here. However, Shangguan Jing didn't care. His feet slightly staggered, and the aura on his body rapidly became dangerous. "In that case, I'll have a good fight with you." Seeing that Shangguan Jing was really going to fight here, Yu Hongshan's face twisted for a moment. He had only said those words to intimidate Shangguan Jing. He didn't really want to fight him. He wasn't afraid of Shangguan Jing. What he wanted to do the most right now was to get out of here. It wouldn't be too late to fight after he got out. However, Shangguan Jing didn't seem to have that intention. Yu Hongshan suppressed his anger and said coldly, "Shangguan Jing, you've been here for a while. Shangguan Jing, you've been here for a while. You should be aware of the danger here. If you really want to fight, sure. We'll talk after we get out. If you want to die here, don't drag others down with you." Shangguan Jing narrowed his eyes. Although he didn't really believe Yu Hongshan's words, he did realize that there was something strange about this place along the way. Yu and the others must have been forcefully devoured and brought here. Unfortunately, he couldn't find them even after searching for a long time. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly as he looked Yu Hongshan up and down. "Do you know how to get out?" Yu Hongshan didn't say anything. He had been trapped here for 1,000 years. Although he hadn't been able to leave that place, he still had a good understanding of this place. Of course, he knew how to get out. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried so hard to get Nan Yi to help him. He was silent for a long time before saying, "As long as you promise that you won't fight before we get out, I can take you out of here." Nan Yi was shocked. "Senior, how can I do that?" This Shangguan Jing was in cahoots with Shangguan Yu and the others. She couldn't wait for him to stay here forever and die here. How could she take him out? Yu Hongshan turned his head halfway and looked at her with an extremely cold gaze. "Shut up if you don't want to die." Nan Yi was stunned by the reprimand. However, due to the other party's pressure, she didn't dare to make a fuss. She could only grit her teeth and swallow the rest of her words. She still had to get out. After leaving this place, she wouldn't have to be threatened by these people anymore. Yu Hongshan looked at Shangguan Jing again, waiting for his answer. Shangguan Jing crossed his arms and frowned, as if he was deep in thought. But Yu Hongshan wasn't in a hurry at all. As long as there was nothing wrong with Shangguan Jing's brain, he would definitely agree to his suggestion. After a moment, Shangguan Jing finally spoke. "Since you know how to get out," Yu Hongshan waited calmly. "Then, you definitely know how to find the others?" Yu Hongshan's expression froze when he heard this. He said gloomily. "Shangguan Jing, what do you mean?" Shangguan Jing laughed. "Nothing much. I just hope that you can help me find you, and the others. Then, we can go out together. After all, you and I are acquaintances. You won't be unwilling to help me with such a small favor, right?" Shangguan Jing. Yu Hongshan suddenly raised his voice. Shangguan Jing's smile didn't change as he raised his hand. "Please." Chu Luiyue was still focused on the zither score in her hand. She didn't remember how much she had read, but the number of zither scores hanging around her had obviously decreased by a lot. And during this process, she read faster and faster. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1708. Chu Luiyue had listened to that tune many times. She was extremely intelligent. She could remember almost everything that she had seen or heard. But because this was not an ordinary score, she still could not memorize it completely even though she had listened to it many times. Every syllable seemed to be wonderful and bouncing in her ears. The sound of the zither brushed past her ears and passed through her mind, but it only left behind a very faint trace. So, Chu Luiyue could only memorize it bit by bit, and then compare it with the score in her hands to distinguish the real from the fake. She did not know if it was because she had gotten used to it, but she gradually became numb to the pain all over her body. This allowed her to divert more energy to focus on the score. Ah Jing's hands paused, and he tilted his head slightly. As far as his eyes could see, it was a thick black. So noisy, he muttered in a low voice, and there was a trace of impatience in his tone. He had never been a patient person. But most of the time, he was too lazy to care, so he turned a blind eye and let it pass. But now was not the time. He had waited for so long, and finally Chu Luiyue came. It was not easy to get his cultivation on the right track. How could he be disturbed? His well-defined fingers moved gently, and a light blade flew out in an instant. And he did all this silently. Chu Luiyue, who was focused on the score, did not notice. Boom! With a violent sound, a ball of fire suddenly exploded in front of Yi Zhao. He tipped his toes and quickly retreated. Violent energy swept out in all directions, and there were even scorch marks on the ground. Nan Yifan and the others retreated again. After a while, the force finally subsided. Smoke and dust filled the air, and there was still the smell of something burning in the air. Hot and anxious. Nan Yifan let go of his hand, and his palm was already wet with sweat. Just now, it was too scary. Yi Zhao and the force of the Black Wall were fighting head-on, and the two sides were fighting fiercely. Just by standing there, they could feel the terrible heat that would rush toward them in the next second. If it were them, they would not even be able to hold on for a third of the time. Patriarch, how are you? Elder Yu quickly rushed to Yi Zhao's side, a rare look of nervousness on his face. Yi Zhao shook his head. I'm fine, but this wall has been completely sealed off by an extremely ferocious force. I'm afraid it will be difficult to force our way in from the outside. Elder Yu had actually already expected this outcome. However, when he saw Yi Zhao's grave expression, his heart unconsciously sank. If even the patriarch had said so, if that was the case, then there was really no way out of this matter. But Dumpling and the others were still inside. They couldn't just let it go like this, could they? Yi Zhao was silent for a moment. He raised his eyes to look at the black wall, and there seemed to be waves surging in his eyes. After a long while, he said, "Let's wait and see." Elder Yu's lips moved. Yes. Nanny Fan and the others also heard this and couldn't help looking at each other. If even Yi Zhao and the others couldn't do anything, then, wouldn't it be even more hopeless for them? Nanny Fan clenched his fists tightly, and his brows furrowed. He was really worried and nervous. After all, Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi were both inside. If something really happened, Patriarch, why don't we wait for a while? An elder beside him advised in a low voice. In the current situation, it was definitely impossible to force it. Since Yi Zhao and the others had decided to wait, then they didn't seem to have a better idea. Nanny Fan took out a jade pendant. For light spots were still floating gently in it. However, one of them had obviously become much dimmer. That was Elder Baitong. Nanny Fan kept the jade pendant and stared at the black wall in front of him. Wait. He waved at the two of them. You guys should also rest for a while and adjust. After rushing all the way here, all of them were exhausted. And they hadn't encountered any trouble. If they encountered any danger again, it would be difficult for them to save their own lives. The two elders nodded in agreement. Nan Yifan closed his eyes and muttered in a low voice. The murderous aura in the god-slaying tomb seems to be getting stronger. He had never encountered such a situation when he came here before. He didn't know what was going on. Just as he turned around and was about to adjust his breathing, a strange fluctuation suddenly came from the black wall. Buzz! Everyone present quickly looked up. They saw the light on the wall rotating. The huge totem was even more dazzling. Then, a figure suddenly fell out of it. Nan Yifan looked over and was pleasantly surprised. Who else could it be but his precious daughter, Nan Yi? Nan Yi was still in a daze, but when she heard this voice, she was shocked and subconsciously looked over. Father? Nan Yi widened her eyes in disbelief. Nan Yifan, however, had already rushed over. How are you? He asked as he pulled Nan Yi. Father. Hiss. Nan Yi cried out in pain. Nan Yifan hurriedly let go of her, only to see that there was a long scratch on her arm. Her flesh and blood had already stained half of her sleeve red. His heart suddenly tightened and he hurriedly sized up Nan Yi's entire body. Only then did he realize that there were countless similar wounds on her body. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was covered in wounds. What made Nan Yifan even more frightened was that Nan Yi's breathing was very weak and her face was extremely pale. She was obviously seriously injured. Nan Yifan's heart ached and he didn't know where to start. Why are you like this? What exactly did she encounter? At this time, the two elders behind him had also rushed over. They were calmer than Nan Yifan. Master, let's treat second miss first. One of the elders reminded him. Nan Yifan came to his senses and hurriedly took out a green jade bottle. He poured out a pill and carefully fed it to Nan Yi. This is a golden origin pill. Take it quickly. From the sound of the jade bottle, there should be a few more pills in it. The golden origin pill was a top-notch pill that only a supremacy doctor could refine. It had a miraculous effect on stopping bleeding, treating injuries, and recovering the body. Even for many first-rate aristocratic families, this thing was very precious, but in Nan Yifan's place, it was easily a bottle. It was obvious that he was rich. Nan Yi swallowed the golden origin pill and felt a warm energy surge through her body. Her pale face also had a hint of rosy color. Only then did Nan Yifan carefully help her up. What exactly is going on? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1709. Nan Yifan asked anxiously. Nan Yi took a deep breath, but she didn't answer his question immediately. Instead, she turned around first. After her, there was no one else. Was she the only one who came out? Seeing that she didn't answer, Nan Yifan was a little anxious. Only then did Nan Yi retract her gaze. Everything that happened just now quickly flashed through her mind. After Shengguan Jing said that, Yu Hongshan was annoyed. As if knowing that there was no need to continue the discussion, Yu Hongshan finally chose to make a move. The two of them started fighting just like that. Although Nan Yi had tried her best to avoid them, that place was narrow and the two of them were powerful. In the fierce battle, she was inevitably affected. Some of the injuries on her body were from that time. But this wasn't fatal. After all, she was still a high god and had treasures to protect herself. But unexpectedly, not long after, the surrounding space began to distort, and at the same time, countless light blades flew over from all directions. Her little bit of strength was simply not enough at this time. She only felt as if her body had been ruthlessly crushed by an invisible force, and her bones and tendons were almost shattered. And those light blades, one after another, ruthlessly scraped against her body. Countless ghastly scars were left behind. She originally thought that she was going to die, but who knew that she actually came out alive. Unfortunately, in the end, her mind was in a mess and she couldn't remember anything. He couldn't even remember how he got out of there. As for Yu Hongshan and Sheng Wanjing, she seemed to have lost contact with them halfway, so she naturally didn't know their whereabouts at this time. Nanny sorted out everything in her mind before she suppressed her sobs and said, "What's wrong?" "Father, thought that I would never see you again." The Nan family followed the rules. When there were other people around, she basically called Nan Yifan father or the head of the family. At this moment, she was calling him father with red eyes. It was obvious that she had suffered a great shock and grievance. Nan Yifan's heart skipped a beat when he heard that, and his heart ached even more. Don't worry. You're safe now. With me around, I won't let you fall into danger again. I and the elders will definitely protect you well. Nan Yi sobbed for a while before she gradually calmed down under Nan Yifan's comfort. Seeing that she had finally stopped crying and her body seemed to be getting better, Nan Yifan couldn't help but ask, "You're out. Where are your brothers?" Nan Yi wiped her tears and said in a hoarse voice, "Earlier, big brother, 2 elders, and I were all sucked into that black wall. But after we went in, we split up. I looked for them for a long time, but I couldn't find them." As she spoke, her eyes filled with tears again, making Nan Yifan's heart ache even more. "It's all because of Yi's incompetence. It's all Yi's fault. If it wasn't for accompanying me, Big Brother and the others wouldn't have encountered such danger." As Nan Yi spoke, she raised her hand to hit herself. Nan Yifan hurriedly stopped him. "What nonsense! How can I blame you for this? If you want to blame someone, it should be your father. In the end, if he hadn't forced them to come over, how could this have happened? He had long regretted it." When she heard Nan Yi's words, she felt as if thousands of arrows had pierced her heart. Fortunately, she was lucky enough to survive. If something had really happened, Nan Yifan didn't dare to think about how he would face all of this. All right, don't worry. Look, you've already come out. Maybe Yuxing and the others will come out safely in a while." Nan Yifan really held on to this hope in his heart. Previously, Elder Yu had said that no one had ever been able to come out of this black wall. But now, wasn't Yi here perfectly fine? Even though she was seriously injured, she still managed to survive. Nan Yifan was actually quite happy. However, Nan Yi's expression wasn't that relaxed. She bit her lip. She knew what the situation inside was like. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was surrounded by danger. Nan Yifan was very optimistic, but she didn't dare to think about it. If she wanted to come out alive under such circumstances, it was purely based on luck. Didn't he see that Yu Hongshan and Sheng Wanjing were nowhere to be seen? She stretched out her hand and grabbed Nan Yifan's sleeve tightly, gritting her teeth. She gritted her teeth and said, "Father, actually, all of this has something to do with Sheng Wanyu." Nan Yifan was stunned. "Sheng Wanyu? Who is that?" He paused for a moment and frowned. But this name sounds a little familiar. He should have heard of this name before, but he suddenly couldn't remember it at this moment. Nan Yi's knuckles turned white. Where is she now?" A cold, indifferent, and oppressive voice suddenly interrupted her words. Nan Yi couldn't help but tremble when she heard the voice. Only then did she look in the direction of the voice. 2 men were standing not far away from them. The one who spoke was the one in front. He was burly and imposing. At this moment, his deep eyes were staring intently at her. Nan Yi immediately became nervous and subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan. "Father, they are," Nan Yifan hurriedly said. "Oh, right. I almost forgot to introduce you. This is clan leader Yi Zhao of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan." Standing behind him is Elder Yu. Why aren't you bowing? Nan Yi was already shocked when she heard the words, Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. When she found out the true identity of the two people in front of her, she opened her mouth in shock and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. Clan leader? This was a top-notch big shot that only existed in rumors. It was said that even venerables were rejected when they went to seek an audience. Arrogant, domineering. This was the impression that most cultivators in the Divine Ruins world had of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. And as the clan leader, Yizhao was even more so. Nan Yi had never expected that she would meet such a person here. No wonder even father was so polite. Nan Yi hurriedly bowed. Junior Nan Yi greets, let me ask you, where is the person you mentioned just now? Yizhao couldn't be bothered to beat around the bush with her and went straight to the point. Nan Yi was stunned for a moment before she quickly glanced at Yizhao. His expression didn't look good. But he obviously knew Shengguanyu. That's right. Shengguanyu had contracted a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. As the clan leader, how could Yizhao not know about it? He was most likely here to find trouble with Shengguanyu. To contract a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. He must be tired of living. Look, even their clan leader was alarmed. At this thought, Nan Yi's thoughts turned and she asked. Clan leader Yizhao, are you looking for that B*TCH2? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1710. As soon as she said that, Elder Yu's eyes turned cold. This young lady looked weak, but he didn't expect her to be so rude. She actually called Shengguanyu a B*TCH directly. Just as he was about to reprimand him, Yizhao suddenly glanced at him without batting an eyelid and stopped him. Elder Yu choked and his Adam's apple bobbed a few times. In the end, he swallowed his words. The undercurrent between the two of them was very subtle and Nan Yi didn't notice it. However, Nan Yifan saw all of this. He couldn't understand Yizhao and Nan Yifan's expressions, but when he thought of their previous reactions, he couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Weren't they here to look for their clansmen? Why did they suddenly say that they were looking for Shengguanyu now? He didn't know what Shengguanyu's relationship with them, but it was a little rash for Nan Yi to speak like this. He slightly emphasized his tone, hinting at a reminder. Nan Yi glanced at him, but didn't take his warning to heart. It seemed that father still didn't know that Shengguanyu had contracted a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix, right? Father, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. She carelessly gave him a word of advice before turning her head away. Nan Yifan wanted to say something, but seeing the subtle atmosphere, he shut his mouth in the end. Yizhao looked at Nan Yi from head to toe. His gaze was substantial and carried a heavy pressure. Nan Yi couldn't help but feel timid. Just when she almost couldn't take it anymore, Yizhao finally retracted his gaze. Only then did Nan Yi feel relieved. That's right. Yizhao was still expressionless and unfathomable. I'm indeed looking for her. Hearing his affirmative answer, Nan Yi was even more convinced of her previous guess. He must have found out about that contracted fiend, so he came all the way here. For a moment, Nan Yi felt smug and regretful. She was smug because after offending the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Shengguanyu was definitely doomed. Unfortunately, she seemed to still be trapped in that black wall until now, and no one knew if she was dead or alive. If Shengguanyu was already dead inside, wouldn't she not be able to see her being tortured? She felt that it was a pity. She sighed and said, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. The only thing I can be sure of now is that she's still there. But I don't know if she's alive or dead or if she can come out in the end. Yizhao furrowed his brows quickly. Actually, this result was within his expectations. Previously, you said that everything was Shengguanyu's fault. What's going on? Tell me in detail. Yi Zhao's tone was calm and indifferent, yet it was noble and arrogant, and it caused others to unconsciously feel reverence and submission. Nan Yi loosened and tightened her grip. This matter, we have to start from a few days ago. After that, Nan Yi told him everything that had happened over the past few days. Of course, she ignored the few times she provoked them and took the initiative to find trouble with them. She emphasized how Sheng Guanyu was rude and attacked them forcefully. The most important thing was that Sheng Guanyu tried to kill her, but in the end, everyone was swallowed by the black wall. According to her, everything seemed to be caused by Sheng Guanyu. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even mention Rong Xiu's name. When outsiders heard this, they would naturally think that Sheng Guanyu was an arrogant, domineering, unreasonable, selfish, and ruthless person. She was also the one who put everyone in a life-and-death situation. Elder Yu couldn't continue listening after hearing a few sentences. It wasn't like he hadn't interacted with that girl before. Nan Yi's words were obviously not trustworthy. He didn't know how Sheng Guanyu had offended her. She was actually trying so hard to smear their name. It was as if she couldn't wait to kill them forever. Could it be that it was just because they were all swallowed by the black wall? That's it. After Nan Yi finished speaking, she glanced at Yi Zhao carefully. Unfortunately, Yi Zhao's expression didn't change. Nan Yi couldn't guess what he was thinking at this time. On the other hand, Nan Yifan and the others were shocked by her words. You're saying that Sheng Guanyu contracted a crimson gold heavenly phoenix? Nan Yi nodded. I don't know what method Sheng Guanyu used. And that crimson gold heavenly phoenix is very obedient to her. Nan Yifan frowned. Since it's a contracted divine beast, it's normal. No wonder Nan Yi dared to say so earlier. There was such a shocking secret behind it. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was an ancient divine beast and had always been extremely arrogant. They didn't even bother to interact with humans, let alone contract. This was undoubtedly a stain on their entire race. It was no wonder that Yi Zhao would take action personally. He was so nervous previously because he was looking for the contracted crimson gold heavenly phoenix. But Nan Yi suddenly thought of something and spoke hesitantly. There seems to be something wrong with that crimson gold heavenly phoenix. She can already transform into a human form, but she looks only 3 or 4 years old. Oh? Nan Yifan couldn't help but be shocked. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan could only transform into a human form after reaching adulthood, right? How could such a situation happen? In that case, that Sheng Guanyu did use some special method? He was puzzled and looked at Yi Zhao and Elder Yu inquisitively. Unfortunately, the other party was more thoughtful and unpredictable than him. Nan Yifan couldn't tell what they were thinking at this time. How did you come out? Yi Zhao suddenly asked. Chapter 17:11. That person looked up. A face full of bloodstains entered everyone's eyes. However, Nan Yi's heart instantly calmed down. Yuxing. Nan Yifan was the first to react. He shouted and immediately rushed over to help him up. Not only was Nan Yuxing's face covered in blood, but his clothes were also soaked in blood. His eyes were tightly shut, and his breathing was weak. It was obvious that he had fainted. The thick smell of blood covered the sky and shrouded the earth. Nan Yifan was extremely anxious. Yuxing. Yuxing. Wake up. Nan Yuxing's eyelids seemed to move, but he still couldn't open his eyes. Nan Yi and the 2 elders also rushed over at this time. Patriarch, please allow me to take eldest young master's pulse first. One of the elders said respectfully. Nan Yifan woke up and hurriedly stepped aside. Yes, yes. Jin He, you do it. Elder Jin He stepped forward and placed his fingers on Nan Yuxing's wrist. After a moment, his expression suddenly changed. A strong sense of uneasiness surged in Nan Yifan's heart. Jean He, how is it? Elder Jean He seemed to be in disbelief as he took the pulse again. However, the result was the same this time. He was silent for a while before he retracted his hand. He sighed and cupped his hands at Nan Yifan. Patriarch, eldest young master's pearl of essence has shattered. What? Nan Yifan's mind went blank, and his figure suddenly staggered. Father. Nan Yi hurriedly went forward to support him and couldn't help but look at Elder Jean He. Eldest brother is extremely powerful. How could his pearl of essence have shattered? Elder Jean He, are you sure you're not mistaken? Elder Jean He said helplessly. If Patriarch and Second Miss don't believe me, you can check it yourself. Jean He didn't dare to say such things. Everyone knew that Nan Yuxing was the next patriarch of the Nan family. The shattering of his pearl of essence meant that he would be a cripple from now on. Then, he would definitely not be able to become the patriarch in this life. If he hadn't confirmed it repeatedly, Elder Jean He wouldn't have dared to say this. Nan Yi was speechless. Her chest seemed to be blocked by something, and she felt suffocated. She turned her neck stiffly and looked at Nan Yuxing. At this moment, Nan Yuxing finally woke up. Big brother. Nan Yi pounced over. Nan Yuxing's vision was still blurry. But he no longer cared. He ignored Nan Yi and looked at Elder Jean He with a dazed expression as he asked, "What's wrong? What you said just now, is it true?" In fact, he had been awake for a long time, but he couldn't open his eyes. However, he could hear everything around him clearly. Naturally, Elder Jean He's words were included as well. Elder Jean He looked away and sighed. Whether it's true or not, eldest young master, shouldn't you know best? That was his core of essence. It was the source of his cultivation. Now that his origin core had shattered, all of the origin power in his body was rapidly escaping out of his body. How could he not feel it? Nan Yuxing's face was expressionless. After a long while, the corners of his mouth twitched with difficulty. That's true, in fact, he had felt it long ago, but he still didn't dare to believe it. From the moment he was born, he was a proud son of heaven. Who would have thought that one day, his core of essence would shatter and he would become a cripple? To him, Nan Yifan, and Nan Yi who were present, this was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue. Big brother, Nan Yi hugged him and cried. However, Nan Yuxing didn't have any reaction. He stared blankly at the void for a long time before he closed his eyes. He originally thought that he would die in there, but who knew that coming out would be even worse than death. Nan Yifan clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white and the veins on his forehead bulged. Jean He, help him deal with his injuries first. Nan Yifan looked calm and composed, but his voice was already hoarse. He had high hopes for Nan Yuxing, and this was undoubtedly a wake-up call. However, he definitely couldn't break down in front of so many people. He couldn't even show too much abnormality. Elder Jean He responded and began to treat Nan Yuxing's injuries. His condition was much more serious than Nan Yi's. In addition to external injuries, internal injuries were even more difficult to treat. His core of essence had shattered. It was really fortunate that he was able to survive. Of course, Nan Yuxing obviously didn't want this fortune himself. He closed his eyes and his face was ashen. It was obvious that he no longer had any motivation to live. Elder Jean He was a little anxious and whispered to Nan Yi. Second Miss, eldest young master has no intention of living. I'm afraid it won't be good if this continues. Nan Yi wiped away her tears. Actually, if she was Big Brother, she probably didn't want to live anymore. But she couldn't just watch Big Brother die like this. She took a deep breath and leaned closer. Big Brother, we haven't taken revenge yet. You must persevere. Don't you want to see what will happen to that B*TCH who reduced us to such a state? Nan Yi gritted her teeth as she said these words. Every word carried a deep hatred and resentment that couldn't be dispelled. She blamed all of this on that one person. At the same time, she pointed all the spearheads at that person. Finally, those words managed to move Nan Yuxing. With great difficulty, he slowly opened his eyes. His originally lifeless and despairing eyes were gradually filled with deep hatred. That's right. All of this was that Sheng Guanyu's fault. If it wasn't for her, they wouldn't have been involved in that, and he wouldn't have become like this. His entire life had been ruined by the other party. Where is she? Nan Yuxing gritted his teeth and spat out a few words. It was as if as long as Chu Luiyue appeared in front of him now, he would immediately suck her blood and eat her flesh. Nan Yi cooperated with Elder Jin He to treat his injuries while comforting him. Big brother, she hasn't come out yet. But since we've all come out, she will definitely come out too. When the time comes, we'll settle this score with her properly. Nan Yuxing held his breath. You're right, he had to live. He had to watch them suffer with his own eyes. With the support of this thought, Nan Yuxing actually managed to endure it. Everyone fell silent and began to wait. Who else would come out next? Elder Yu glanced at Nan Yuxing with a serious expression. He wasn't worried about Nan Yuxing, but, judging from Nan Yuxing's injuries, the situation inside was probably not optimistic. Moreover, 2 people from the Nan family had already come out, but Dumpling and the rest were still nowhere to be seen. He looked at Yi Zhao and realized that Yi Zhao was staring at the black wall with a strange expression. He was about to ask something when he suddenly heard Yi Zhao shout. Step back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 17:12. Elder Yi Zhao didn't even think before he tapped the tip of his foot on the ground and flashed backwards. Immediately after, a ripple suddenly rose from the black wall. Whoosh, like a surging river, waves surging. The surrounding heaven and earth energy seemed to be affected by this force and started to surge. The huge totem on the wall suddenly spun faster. A violent and majestic aura surged out from it. Nan Yifan and the rest were the first to bear the brunt. They didn't even have time to set up a barrier before they were enveloped by the terrifying force. Under the impact of this power, the figures of several people instantly flew out uncontrollably. In a hurry, Nan Yifan hurriedly pulled Nan Yuxing. But before he could pull him, he missed. Bang! They fell to the ground one after another. Nan Yuxing's chest shook, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Yuxing! Big brother! Nan Yifan and the rest struggled to get up. Seeing this scene, they were almost scared out of their wits. But at this moment, a few figures rushed out from the black wall. Nan Yifan saw the 2 people in front clearly. Elder Wu Peng. Elder Bai Tong. He had just helped Nan Yuxing up and was about to go over when he suddenly heard a crisp sound. Crack. Something seemed to have broken. Nan Yifan suddenly thought of something, and his eyes widened. He quickly took out a jade token. Of the 4 light spots inside, there were now only 3. Among them, the one that belonged to Elder Bai Tong had broken. Elder Bai Tong was dead. He sucked in a cold breath. The remaining 2 elders hurried over. Elder Wu Peng, how are you? Although Elder Wu Peng was still conscious, his face and body were stained with blood, and his breath was weak. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. Elder Jin He immediately helped him treat his injuries. The other elder came to Elder Bai Tong's side and realized that he was no longer breathing. He looked at Nan Yifan in panic. Family head, Elder Bai Tong, Nan Yifan closed his eyes and waved his hand. That elder immediately understood what he meant. With a heavy heart, he moved Elder Bai Tong's body to the side, preparing to bring it back for burial. Nan Yifan glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw that a section of Elder Bai Tong's calf had been cut off. He frowned. Elder Bai Tong's leg. What's going on? It doesn't look like a recent injury. Nan Yi hesitated for a moment. She had only mentioned that Elder Bai Tong had been injured during the battle with Shangguanyu, but she had not mentioned that his leg had been cut off by Rongxiu. That is, before she could explain, another figure fell out of the black wall. Nan Yi instinctively looked over and her eyes lit up. Uncle Luo Yen. The man who fell to the ground and stood up with one hand supporting himself was none other than Luo Yen. Hearing this voice, Luo Yen looked up. When he saw Nan Yi, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he turned his gaze and saw Nan Yifan and the others. It turned out that they had already arrived. Luo Yen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and was about to walk towards them when he suddenly felt a chill all over his body. He immediately became alert. His entire body tensed up. At this moment, he realized that there were two men standing not far away from Nan Yifan and the others. They were burly and had unfamiliar faces. However, they were extremely strong. When he saw the appearance of the man standing in front of him, Luo Yen suddenly thought of something and his expression changed slightly. This person was Luo Yen. Nan Yifan walked over and sized him up. After confirming that he had only suffered some minor injuries, he heaved a sigh of relief. At this point, all of their people had come out. Other than Elder Bai Tong, Elder Wu Peng and Nan Yuxing were both seriously injured. Nan Yi and Luo Yen were in a slightly better condition, but they obviously needed a long time to recuperate. He wondered if there would be any side effects. Nan Yifan had mixed feelings. On one hand, he was glad that these people, except for Elder Bai Tong, had all come out alive. On the other hand, the battle was tragic and their injuries were serious. Especially Nan Yuxing, who had become a cripple. It was more painful for him than death. At the same time, it also made Nan Yifan's heart ache. Luo Yen nodded. Patriarch, don't worry. I'm fine. He quickly scanned his surroundings and basically determined what the situation was. He had known that it was extremely dangerous inside, so it was normal for such an outcome. Now, his attention was more on the two unfamiliar men. Those two are. Nan Yifan came back to his senses and said, "Oh, I almost forgot to introduce them to you. These two are Patriarch Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan." Luo Yen was shocked. He had already guessed that these two might be important figures in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, but he didn't expect that Yi Zhao, the Patriarch, would also come. Suddenly, he thought of something. Perhaps they came for the contracted Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix in Shangguanyu? Luo Yen suppressed the many thoughts in his heart and bowed politely. Yi Zhao frowned slightly. These people had all come out, but why wasn't there any movement from Dumpling and the rest? Seeing that Yi Zhao didn't pay much attention to him, Luo Yen wasn't angry. The other party was famous for his arrogance, so it was normal for him to have such an attitude. Besides, from the looks of it, he should still be waiting for the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix to come out, right? In fact, everyone present had such doubts in their hearts. Since both sides went in together, why was it that only Nan Yi and the rest came out, but the other party didn't come out at all? This made people think more about it. Nan Yifan thought for a moment and said, do you think Shangguanyu and the rest will still come out? He hated the other party to the bone and couldn't wait to end their lives with his own hands. Nan Yi paused and sneered. Who knows? Maybe they've already died in there. Chi. Two figures appeared almost at the same time. Nan Yi looked over and her heart sank. These two people were actually Nan Suhuai and Chu Ning. What was even more shocking was that other than a few sporadic wounds on their bodies, they were actually fine. From their expressions and state, it was obvious that they weren't injured much. Nan Yifan originally wanted to surround them immediately, but after seeing Nan Suhuai, he was stunned. Why was the dean of Lingxiao College here? At the same time, Nan Suhuai also noticed the strange atmosphere around him and looked over. Nan Yifan? He had actually brought people over? No, the point was that Nan Yi and the rest seemed to have come out before them. Looking around, Nan Suhui didn't see the person he wanted to see and couldn't help but feel disappointed and worried. Suddenly, his expression changed. Clan leader Yi Zhao. Why are you here? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1713. Nan Yi suddenly snorted. He actually had the cheek to ask this question. President Nan, don't you know what your precious disciple has done? She must be tired of living to contract a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Nan Suhui was stunned. He guessed what Nan Yi was referring to, but, wasn't this matter already resolved before? Rong Xiu had clearly sent a letter saying that you had brought Dumpling out of Phoenix God Mountain safely. He had always thought that this matter had been satisfactorily resolved. Could it be that he had guessed wrongly? Yi Zhao said lightly. I'm indeed here to look for Shengguan Yu and Dumpling. Nan Suhuai's heart sank. What exactly was going on? If they didn't reach a satisfactory conclusion, Yi Zhao would never let them go and even allowed them to leave with Dumpling. Why did he suddenly? Nan Suhui took a closer look at him. Yi Zhao's expression was calm and nothing could be seen. For a moment, he was a little nervous. If Yi Zhao was really here to cause trouble for them, then, Elder Yu's gaze landed on Chu Ning and he was a little surprised. Nan Suhui frowned. Elder Yu's lips curled into a smile before he shifted his gaze away. This man must be the person Shengguan Yu was looking for in the god-slaying tomb this time. According to what Nan Yi said, Shengguan Yu called him Daddy, so they must be father and daughter. He was just a stage 1 warrior, but he had a god realm. If he guessed correctly, he most likely had an indestructible divine body. Shengguan Yu was already surprising enough, but he didn't expect her father to be just as extraordinary. This family was really. Nan Suhui heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Elder Yu had no intention of causing trouble for them. He turned to look at Chu Ning, only to find that the latter looked calm as if she didn't take this matter to heart. Nan Suhui couldn't help but lean closer and ask in a low voice. Chu Ning, are you really not worried at all? Chu Ning was stunned. Worried? What are you worried about? Nan Suhui choked and shifted his gaze away. Those two are the clan leader and the 5th elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Chu Ning nodded. I know. And then? Then? What was the point of asking, then? Nan Suhui almost couldn't breathe. Did Chu Ning not know how big of a trouble it was for you, to contract a crimson gold heavenly phoenix in private? Dumpling. Chu Ning blinked. Looking at Nan Suhuai's nervous expression, she suddenly understood something. Dean Nan, do you still not know? Boom. Before he could finish speaking, the sound of an intense collision of energy suddenly rang out. Everyone turned around and saw two figures, one in front and one behind, rushing out from the black wall. However, the person in front of him was illusory and translucent. It was actually just a soul. The person behind him was tall and sturdy. His face was piercingly cold, and his soul conduit realm battle intent surged. It was Shengguan Jing. From the looks of it, the two of them seemed to be fighting. Moreover, it was obvious that Shengguan Jing had the upper hand. That soul's aura was chaotic, and it was obvious that he couldn't hold on much longer. This scene shocked everyone present. Why did another soul suddenly appear? Senior? Nan Yi's eyes widened and she couldn't help but blurt out. Nan Yifan immediately looked at her. You know that person? Nan Yi felt that she had said something wrong. At first, she thought that she was the only one who came out, so she skipped to the part where she met Yu Hongshan. Who knew that the two of them were actually still alive, and they were fighting from inside to outside. At this moment, Yu Hongshan, who was in a sorry state, also saw Nan Yi. Help me. He didn't even think about it before he shouted in a deep voice. Shangguan Jing was indeed powerful. Even though he had been cultivating hard for the past 1,000 years, he was still slightly inferior when it came to fighting. If this continued, he would definitely die in Shangguan Jing's hands today. Nan Yi gritted her teeth. Father, this senior helped me before. Let's help him now. It would be great if they could get rid of Shangguan Jing at the same time. When Nan Yifan heard this, he nodded without any hesitation. However, he had just taken a step when a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Nan Suhuai. He said with a faint smile. Master Nan, are you going to attack Senior Shangguan Jing? Nan Yifan sneered. Why? Is Dean Nan planning to stop me? Senior Shangguan Jing is Yu Er's ancestor and is also a distinguished guest of our Lingxiao College. If he's in danger, there's no reason for us to sit back and do nothing. Although Nan Suhuai was smiling, his eyes were very determined. Nan Yifan slowly clenched his fists. Dean Nan, are you really going to go against us for Shangguan Jing? Nan Suhuai shrugged with a smile. Didn't your people already do that previously? Don't you think it's ridiculous to ask me this question now? His gaze landed on Nan Yi meaningfully. If it weren't for your daughter provoking us time and time again and finding trouble with us, things wouldn't have developed to this extent. We haven't gone to find trouble with you yet, but you're planning to make a move on us first? Shangguan Jing was Yu Er's Taizu, so they naturally had to protect him. Nan Yifan sneered when he heard this. It's clearly Shangguan Yu's fault, but now Dean Nan wants to falsely accuse her. You want to push all the blame onto my daughter? Nan Suhuai raised his eyebrows. He already knew how Nan Yi explained to these people after she came out. Oh? Nan Suhuai asked with interest. Nan Yi said that it's all Yu Er's fault. She didn't need to say it. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell what's going on. There seemed to be magma surging wildly in Nan Yifan's chest, as if it would rush out in the next moment. Nan Yuxing was crippled, Elder Bai Tong was dead, and Nan Yi and Elder Wu Peng were seriously injured. This time, they could be said to have suffered heavy losses. Nan Yifan had a belly full of anger and didn't know where to vent it. But Nan Suhuai seemed indifferent to his agitated emotions. He smiled. Of course, Nan Yi would gloss over everything and describe everything in a way that was beneficial to her. And Nan Yifan doted on her so much, so he naturally believed her without a doubt. If there was no solid evidence, it was useless no matter how much others said. Seeing that Nan Suhuai didn't speak, Nan Yifan thought that he was guilty and sneered. Why, Dean Nan doesn't intend to continue? If you really have the confidence, why don't you confront me on the spot? Nan Suhuai narrowed his eyes slightly. Confront? He was probably going to pester endlessly. Nan Yifan was even more certain of his guess. He raised his chin slightly and said coldly. If you don't dare to confront me, please step aside immediately. Just as he finished speaking, a clear and cold voice, like the sound of jade striking stone, suddenly sounded. I will confront you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17-14. The voice was cold and calm, but it also carried a powerful pressure that made people dare not defy it. Everyone present could not help but look in the direction of the voice. On the black wall, the power around the huge totem suddenly surged. The void rippled with it. Then, a tall and slender figure walked out from it. The person who came was handsome and elegant. He was dressed in a snow-white robe, and he looked elegant. In an instant, everything in the surroundings seemed to dim in color. All the spiritual aura in the world seemed to converge on this one person. Everyone was silent for a moment. The man raised his eyes slightly, and a pair of eyes that were as deep as the sea quietly looked at the crowd. It was a very light look, but it was so dense that no one dared to look at it directly. When he first appeared, everyone thought he was like an immortal. But when they saw this pair of eyes, they were shocked to realize, it was an illusion. Everything that happened before was just an illusion. This was not an immortal who flew down from the 9 mysterious heavens, but a devil who stepped on fire from hell. However, such a feeling was fleeting. Rong Xiu's eyes moved slightly, and that thick layer of bloody killing intent quietly dissipated. When they looked at him again, that pair of phoenix eyes had returned to their usual gentle, elegant, indifferent, and distant look. Rong Xiu. Seeing the person who came, Nan Suhui and Chu Ning were the first to react, and they both looked happy. Previously, they were still worried that he would not be able to come out safely. Now that they saw that he was safe and sound, and even his clothes were as spotless as usual, they immediately relaxed. He nodded slightly at Nan Suhui and Chu Ning, indicating that he was fine. Then, he raised his eyes slightly and looked at Shengwan Jing and Yu Hongshan. Since he came out, the two of them had temporarily stopped fighting. Sensing Rong Xiu's cold gaze on him, Yu Hongshan's heart skipped a beat. Danger. Even Shengwan Jing did not cause such a strong sense of danger to him. Yu Hongshan's mind raced. This man called Rong Xiu looked to be in his early 20s. But his strength was unfathomable. Even he couldn't detect it. More importantly, out of so many people, only Rong Xiu came out unscathed. This made Yu Hongshan vigilant. Senior Shengwan, is this the person you mentioned before who betrayed you? Rong Xiu asked calmly. Shengwan Jing came back to his senses and nodded. He vaguely felt that there was something different about Rong Xiu, but he couldn't tell what it was. Rong Xiu nodded. Please do as you wish. He didn't expect this person to still be alive. However, this was also good. Shengwan Jing would be able to deal with him personally to take revenge for what happened back then. Don't worry, no one here will interfere with your matter. You can do whatever you want with him. Rong Xiu said calmly. Shengwan Jing's heart stirred slightly. He finally knew what was wrong. When Rong Xiu said these words, he was using a declarative sentence. His tone was too matter-of-fact, as if he didn't care about the objections of others at all. To put it bluntly, Rong Xiu's words were actually for everyone present to hear. This was an order. Shengwan Jing was secretly shocked. He knew that Rong Xiu had a noble status and had always been high and mighty. But apart from him, the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan, was also here today. The Nan family's status was higher than Yuntian Towers. If he said this, Nan Yifan, Shengwan Jing subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan and was suddenly stunned. Why did Nan Yifan's reaction seem a little off? Nan Yi had also noticed this. After seeing Rong Xiu appear, her emotions were very complicated. Although all the previous twists and turns had already worn away most of her liking for Rong Xiu, it was very difficult for her to completely oppose Rong Xiu. But Rong Xiu obviously didn't take her seriously and even came out to confront her. It would be a lie to say that Nan Yi didn't feel upset. At the same time, she was also angry. Hence, she finally decided to ask her father for help, Nan Yifan. Rong Xiu and the rest were extremely rude to her previously. Now that her father was here, let's see how they could still be arrogant. However, Nan Yifan didn't respond even after Nan Yi shouted twice. Father? Father? She frowned strangely and tugged at Nan Yifan's sleeve. Only then did Nan Yifan come back to his senses and look at her with a stiff expression. What's wrong? Nan Yi frowned even more. What's wrong? Wasn't the situation already right in front of her? Father, are you all right? Nan Yi asked nervously. He had always been high-spirited and she rarely saw him with such an expression. Why didn't you mention it before? Nan Yifan didn't finish speaking, but Nan Yi already understood. Was he talking about Rong Xiu? Nan Yi was about to defend herself when she suddenly remembered what Rong Xiu had said previously. Wait a minute. From the looks of it, her father and Rong Xiu really knew each other? Patriarch Nan, long time no see. Rong Xiu looked at Nan Yifan and said indifferently. Nan Yifan's expression instantly became subtle. His jaw tightened and he squeezed out an extremely stiff smile. A long time no see. Successor. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the field instantly became even more strange. Almost everyone looked at Nan Yifan with a strange look in their eyes. Especially the people from the Nan family. When they heard Nan Yifan call out the words, successor, so politely, it was as if they had seen a ghost. He was the patriarch of the Nan family. Whether it was status, experience, or strength, he was much higher than Rong Xiu. Why did it seem like he was the one who was more nervous and perturbed now? Nan Yi widened her eyes. Father? Chapter 17:15. Nan Yifan's mind buzzed. It was as if an invisible hammer had smashed him on the head, causing him to freeze on the spot. The matriarch of Yuntian Tower, that's right. He finally remembered why the name Shengguanyu sounded familiar. Wasn't that the princess whom Rong Xiu had personally appointed? This matter had spread like wildfire among the many aristocratic families in the Divine Ruins. However, the Nan family had never cared much about these things, and their subordinates would never mention it in front of him. He had only found out about it after inquiring about it in private. However, this matter had passed for a long time, and almost no one around him had mentioned it. Over time, he had forgotten about it. That was why he didn't think of it when he heard the name Shengguanyu. Miscalculation. What a miscalculation. At this moment, Nan Yifan was so regretful that his intestines turned green. That was Rong Xiu's woman. Why did he have to take things so hard that he threatened to cause trouble for her? He even brought so many people from the Nan family to fall out with them. Look at these people. Among them, there was the father of Shengguanyu, the master of Shengguanyu, and the Taizu of Shanghaiyu. Offending them was undoubtedly offending Shengguanyu. Wasn't that the same as offending Rong Xiu? Nan Yifan finally couldn't laugh anymore. This time, even his stiff fake smile became very forced. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and spat out a few words with great difficulty. Misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Hey, didn't second Miss Nan just say that they were reduced to such a miserable state because of that B*TCH in Shengguanyu? In the almost suffocating silence, Elder EU suddenly spoke. He blinked. Just now, the head of the Nan family seemed to have said that he wanted to avenge them. How did it suddenly become a misunderstanding? Yi Zhao glanced at him. After so many years, his bad habit of watching a show had not changed. However, this time, he was happy to watch the show. As soon as Elder EU spoke, Nan Yifan had a bad premonition. After listening to him, he could only gnash his teeth in hatred. Why did this EU just have to come out and stir up trouble at this time? If he didn't do it on purpose, then he must have seen a ghost. However, he could no longer be bothered to question Elder EU. Instead, he immediately looked up at Rong Xiu. No, it's not like that. Therefore. Meeting Rong Xiu's eyes, Nan Yifan's voice suddenly stopped. He felt as if his throat was being strangled by an invisible hand. The rest of his words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. That deep and cold gaze fell on her, chilling her to the bone. Oh. Rong Xiu's voice was light as he looked at Nan Yi. Is what Elder EU said true? Nan Yi felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. She had never felt so clearly that she was only one step away from death. A terrifying pressure instantly enveloped her. It almost made her unable to breathe. Nan Yifan hurriedly took a step forward and stood in front of Nan Yi as he hurriedly explained. Successor. It's not like that. Yi didn't say that. So, Elder EU was lying in public and deceiving I? Rong Xiu's question made Nan Yifan speechless. Elder Yu crossed his arms and raised his chin. Patriarch Nan, aren't you being too mean by saying that? To think that I've been speaking up for you in front of the patriarch. Is this how you repay me? Nan Yifan wanted to tear his mouth apart. Who was the one being mean? Wasn't he the one who came out to stir up trouble first? And he even said that he spoke up for him in front of Yi Zhao. He didn't hear any of that. He only heard that he exposed Yi in public and put all of them in danger. Nan Yifan took a deep breath and forced himself to ignore Elder Yu. There are indeed many misunderstandings in today's matter. I can personally explain from the beginning. Father. He's just the successor of Yuntian Tower. Why do you have to be so polite? A voice full of unwillingness and anger suddenly sounded. It was Nan Yuxing. Everything was fine at first, but ever since Rong Xiu appeared, everything seemed to have suddenly changed. He really didn't understand why his father was so polite to Rong Xiu. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was in awe and fear. If it was any other time, Nan Yuxing would never ask this question. Anyone with a brain could see that there was something wrong with Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rong Xiu. However, Nan Yuxing had already lost his mind. He was seriously injured and his mind was already a little muddled. When he saw this scene, he was instantly furious and burned the last string of reason in his heart. Thus, he suddenly shouted this sentence in a crazy manner. Yuxing. Nan Yifan was also stunned, and then endless anger surged in his heart. This unfilial son, does he know what he's saying? The situation was already difficult enough for him, and now that Nan Yuxing had interfered, the situation became even worse. Nan Yifan suddenly raised his hand and shouted sternly. You! Come and apologize to the successor immediately. His words didn't serve as a warning to Nan Yuxing. Instead, it made him even crazier. Previously, when he was facing Rong Xiu, his attitude had always been high and mighty. Even if he wasn't a match for Rong Xiu, he actually didn't take Rong Xiu seriously. How could Yuntian Tower be compared to the Nan family? However, now, Nan Yifan was asking him to bow down to Rong Xiu? He would never agree. He's not worthy. Nan Yuxing straightened his neck and shouted. Slap. A loud and clear sound of a slap suddenly rang out. It was Nan Yifan who gave him a hard slap across the air. Nan Yuxing's voice instantly disappeared. His cheek was slapped to one side, and it quickly became red and swollen. Nan Yifan was so angry that his chest violently rose and fell, and his palm was still trembling slightly. Eldest young master. The elders standing at the side were also stunned when they saw the situation. They only came back to their senses when they saw blood seeping out from the corner of Nan Yuxing's mouth. Just as they were about to go over to help Nan Yuxing, they heard Nan Yifan shout again. No one is allowed to help him. His voice was stern, and the two elders didn't dare to disobey. They could only stand there awkwardly and let Nan Yuxing's body sway and fall to the ground. Nan Yuxing was already seriously injured, and Nan Yifan had used a lot of strength in this slap. It wasn't something that he could withstand. Almost everyone didn't understand why Nan Yifan's attitude had taken a 180-degree turn. However, they weren't stupid. They knew that there must be an unknown reason, so they all tactfully kept their mouths shut. Nan Yifan closed his eyes, then looked at Rong Xiu. Successor, my son offended you just now. Please forgive him. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Just because of this slap? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 17-16. It was obvious what he meant. Not enough. Nan Yifan clenched his fists. He knew that Rong Xiu wasn't someone to be trifled with and that it wouldn't be easy to get past him. Hence, he purposely gave Nan Yuxing a tight slap. However, Rong Xiu did not appreciate it. He clenched his teeth and walked over to Nan Yuxing without saying a word. He dragged him up and gave him another slap. This time, it was a slap to the face. Crisp. Loud. Before Nan Yuxing could react, there was a loud noise in his head and a sharp pain came. Bang! He fell to the ground again and spat out a mouthful of blood. This time, Nan Yuxing was so dizzy that he almost fainted. Nan Yifan paused. Rong Xiu did not say a word. He took a deep breath and gave Nan Yuxing a few more slaps. Nan Yuxing could not say a word this time. After spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Nan Yifan closed his eyes. How could he not feel distressed and upset? However, at this moment, he could not think of any other way to solve the problem. At this point, Rong Xiu finally spoke. Why do you have to do this, Nan family head? I am not a narrow-minded person. Why would I care about what he said? Nan Yifan spat out a mouthful of blood. You don't care? If you don't care, why didn't you say anything earlier? You only spoke when Nan Yuxing fainted? However, he could not say these words directly. Nan Yifan threw Nan Yuxing to the ground. He spoke rudely to the saint and should be taught a lesson. Speaking of which, it's my fault for not teaching my son well. I'm really ashamed. When Nan Yifan said this, there was a hint of anger on his face. It was as if he wanted to kick Nan Yuxing a few more times. Rong Xiu looked at Nan Yuxing, who was lying on the ground, and his thin red lips curled up slightly. No matter what, Nan Yuxing is the only son of the Nan family head. Now that his core of essence has been shattered and he has become a cripple, how can he bear the punishment of the Nan family head? As he spoke, he raised his chin. Elders, please treat him as soon as possible. Every word was like a steel knife, ruthlessly stabbing into Nan Yifan's heart. His face paled, but in the end, he waved his hand. The two elders standing at the side hurriedly stepped forward. It wasn't easy for Nan Yuxing's condition to take a turn for the better. With these few slaps, all of his previous efforts had been wasted. It was even worse than the beginning. Nan Yifan then turned around and looked at Rong Xiu. His expression was extremely restrained. Saint, there were many misunderstandings in the past. However, I have already taught them a harsh lesson. Do you think we can let this matter pass? Anyone could tell that Nan Yifan was begging for mercy. Elder Yu couldn't help but chuckle and whisper, interesting. Although Yuntian Tower was a first-class aristocratic family, it was still slightly inferior to the Nan family. It was reasonable to say that when Rong Xiu and Nan Yifan went up against each other, Rong Xiu should be the one at a disadvantage. However, the truth was exactly the opposite. They really didn't know what Nan Yifan was afraid of. Or had they underestimated Rong Xiu before? Yi Zhao put his hands behind his back and narrowed his eyes slightly. However, he didn't say anything. In fact, he was also thinking about this problem in his heart. Perhaps, their understanding of Rong Xiu was really far from enough. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he had heard something funny. Then, he said slowly, "You're right. Patriarch Nan, did you think wrongly? From the beginning to the end, I was blaming Nan Yi, not him." He said the last few words very slowly and clearly, one word at a time. Nan Yifan's expression suddenly changed. Rong Xiu was playing with him. However, before he could explode, Rong Xiu continued. You provoked her time and time again, but you, was magnanimous and didn't take it to heart. Unfortunately, you don't know what it means to quit when you're ahead. Not only do you not have the slightest bit of remorse, but you're even slandering and humiliating her in public now. Rong Xiu spoke very slowly. His voice was light, but there was a hint of coldness in it. Nan Yi only felt that these words were like a sharp and cold knife against her neck. Back and forth, just waiting for the most suitable time to cut down ruthlessly. She trembled all over and her legs went weak unconsciously. She subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan. Dad. Dad. Rong Xiu wanted to kill her. He was determined to kill her. How could Nan Yifan feel good? He had already gone all out just now and almost lost half of Nan Yuxing's life, but he didn't expect that Rong Xiu still wouldn't let it go. After hesitating for a long time, Nan Yifan said with difficulty. What exactly does the saint want? Rong Xiu must have seen through all his tricks at a glance. It was obvious that Rong Xiu didn't care about those things at all. He would only stop when he was truly satisfied. So, Nan Yifan simply chose to ask directly. Rong Xiu laughed. Patriarch Nan is straightforward enough. Then I won't beat around the bush. He raised his chin slightly and glanced at Nan Yi coldly. I want her tongue. His voice was low and his tone was extremely light, but it was not to be disobeyed. This wasn't a compromise or a discussion, but an order. Nan Yifan felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on his chest. He knew that Rong Xiu had always been ruthless and merciless. Today, their people had offended him ruthlessly, so he would definitely take revenge. But, this request was really too much. He only had this one daughter and had always regarded her as the apple of his eye. Usually, he would coax her for a long time and dote on her very much. Now that Rong Xiu wanted to cut off her tongue, Nan Yifan couldn't accept it no matter what. Nan Yi clutched his sleeves tightly. Her eyes were red and bean-sized tears kept falling. Father. Don't be like this. She had clearly seen her elder brother's miserable state just now. At this moment, she completely understood that her father was indeed extremely afraid of Rong Xiu. If her father really agreed to this request, hot tears fell on the back of Nan Yifan's hand. He closed his eyes and held Nan Yi's hand. I don't agree to this condition. He could accept other punishments, but he was definitely not willing to sacrifice his bloodline. Just now, he seemed to be extremely ruthless towards Nan Yuxing, but in fact, he had been controlling his strength and skills, so he didn't cause any fatal injuries. But if he handed Nan Yi to Rong Xiu to deal with, the consequences, he didn't even dare to think about it. Rong Xiu didn't look surprised, as if he had already expected this. The corners of his lips seemed to be smiling as he said lightly, Patriarch Nan, I've already given you face. Unfortunately, he didn't want it. Nan Yifan immediately tensed up. Sensing his nervousness, Nan Yi had a bad feeling. Suddenly, she had an idea and shouted at Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu in a sharp voice. Patriarch Yi Zhao. That Shengguan Yu privately contracted the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix, which is a heinous crime. Rong Xiu is also wrong for trying to cover it up. Are you really going to sit back and do nothing? Digression, it's the last 3 days, please vote. Every extra vote can be added to the explosive update on the 11th of next month. Xiaoxiang and QQ Reading have super surprise New Year's Day activities respectively, and they have already pinned the comments section to welcome everyone to participate. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:17. When Elder Yu heard this, he almost laughed out loud. Nan Yi was really crazy. She was about to die, but she still dared to say such things. She was afraid that she wouldn't die completely. Based on the current situation, the Nan family was completely at a disadvantage. Nan Yi was undoubtedly treating them as her last straw, and she was still hoping that they would help her. Even if they were really here to cause trouble for Shengguan Yu, what did it have to do with her? They couldn't be bothered if Rong Xiu wanted to cut off her tongue. Yi Zhao frowned slightly, and a trace of impatience finally appeared on his face. Nan Yi thought that she had persuaded the other party and was secretly delighted. Then, she heard Rong Xiu laugh and ask. Clan leader Yi Zhao, do you want to help them? Yi Zhao spat out coldly. What does their life and death have to do with me? The reason why he was impatient was purely because he felt that it was too noisy after hearing Nanny talk about this over and over again. Rong Xiao nodded, and a smile appeared on his lips. Thank you for your understanding, clan leader Yi Zhao. The two of them had only exchanged a few words and had already finalized the result. One couldn't be bothered, while the other was determined to kill. Nanny felt like she had fallen into an ice cave. She never expected that the other party would be so indifferent. Nanny was almost crazy after being forced into a desperate situation. She shouted at the top of her lungs. Clan leader Yi Zhao. Do you really not mind at all that Shangguan you contracted the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix privately? Even if the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is tarnished, you don't care at all? Yi Zhao's eyes turned cold. He was about to speak when he suddenly sensed something and looked up. Splash! The sound of tide surging could be heard. Everyone looked over and realized that the energy of heaven and earth around the black wall was surging rapidly into the huge and mysterious totem. It was daytime now, and the originally clear sky quickly became gloomy. Dark clouds gathered, stacking on top of each other. The sky was covered by thick clouds, and everything between heaven and earth seemed to be shrouded in a layer of shadow. Only the totem on the black wall shone brighter and brighter. Then, with the totem as the center, the blackness on the wall suddenly began to fade away. The originally thick and mottled stones gradually became transparent, glowing with a sparkling and translucent luster. As for the totem, it finally began to show its original brilliant colors. Everyone was deeply shocked by this scene. For a moment, their minds were shaken, and they didn't know how to react. This wall had endured the baptism of tens of thousands of years in the god-slaying mound, but it still stood proudly. It was always deep and heavy. Every stone piled on top of it was deeply engraved with everything that had happened here. They were solemn, ancient, and untouchable. However, at this moment, their appearances had completely changed. Everyone could even see the mottled traces left behind on the surface, but only the thick black color was gone. Gradually, a slender and straight figure appeared behind the totem. Chu Ning's eyes suddenly lit up, and he unconsciously took a step forward. The woman in red sitting cross-legged was none other than At this moment, she was sitting cross-legged quietly, staring intently at a transparent page in her hand. Her black hair hung down, and her side profile was beautiful and calm. Her body seemed to be shrouded in a layer of indescribable unique aura, which easily isolated all the hustle and bustle around her. From everyone's point of view, Chu Luiyue seemed to be trapped in a huge transparent space. They could see her every move, but there was a wall in the middle, which was far away and untouchable. Silence reigned in the field. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue tilted her head slightly and looked over. Her eyes were calm, but they also seemed to contain a myriad of stars, clear and bright. Immediately, she frowned slightly and said lightly, "It's so noisy." Almost at the same time, a childish voice was heard. "It's so noisy." Everyone was shocked. Only then did they see that not far away from Chu Luiyue, there was a little girl with her hands on her waist, looking over angrily. She looked to be no more than 3 or 4 years old. She was wearing a reddish-gold lotus leaf dress, and her hair was tied up in 2 buns with a red string and a golden bell. Her chubby, white, and tender little face was as cute as snow. It was Dumpling. At this moment, her big black grape-like eyes were burning with anger. Hot and anxious. That was real fire. "It's so noisy." Dumpling was really angry. Ever since she was swallowed into this strange space, she had been looking for traces of Yu. After searching back and forth for a long time, she was finally pushed here by a strong force not long ago, and only then did she see Yu. When she saw Yu, she wanted to pounce on her. But she soon realized that Yu seemed to be busy with something. So, she waited obediently at the side. In the end, not long after, the originally dark space gradually brightened. Then, she heard a lot of noise. Especially that sharp and ear-piercing female voice, which annoyed Dumpling to death. Now, she was disturbing you. She would never tolerate it anymore. I've said it before, she raised her hand and pointed at Nanny. You are really annoying. Seeing Dumpling appear and criticize her directly, Nanny panicked for a moment. But she quickly calmed down. What was there to worry about? The more this crimson gold heavenly phoenix protected Shengguanyu, the angrier clan leader Yi Zhao and the rest would be. How could the noble crimson gold heavenly phoenixes tolerate their own kind contracting with a human? Moreover, they were so loyal and sincere. This time, she didn't believe that Yi Zhao and the rest could tolerate it. She sneered, turned her head, and said, "Clan leader Yi Zhao, did you see that? Not only did Shengguanyu contract with your own kind, but she also ordered her around and completely treated her as her slave. Can you really take this lying down?" She thought that Yi Zhao would definitely fly into a rage after seeing this scene and hearing these words. However, Yi Zhao's reaction was completely out of Nan Yi's expectations. He stared intently at Dumpling, who was inside the wall. After confirming that she was safe and sound, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, he turned to look at Nan Yi. Meeting those cold and dignified eyes, Nan Yi suddenly felt a surge of uneasiness. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Yi Zhao's brows moved slightly, and he said calmly and dignified. "Dumpling is Shengguanyu's contracted beast. Isn't it normal to speak up for her?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17-18. Nan Yi widened her eyes in disbelief. Nan Yifan and the rest also quickly turned around and looked at Yi Zhao, almost suspecting that they were hallucinating. What did Yi Zhao just say? Very normal? He actually felt that this matter was very normal? Could it be that he's crazy? In an instant, Nan Yi felt that the world was in chaos. Yi Zhao. He was famous in the Divine Ruins world. Almost everyone knew how much he hated and was indifferent to the human race. But now, his own clan had formed a contract with the human race, and he actually didn't care? All the words that Nan Yi had prepared were suddenly stuck in her throat and she couldn't say anything else. She pinched herself hard and relied on this pain to confirm that she wasn't dreaming. And those words were indeed spat out by Yi Zhao. You. What, do you mean? Nan Yi stuttered. At this moment, she had already sensed that things seemed to be different from what she had expected. She wanted to try to salvage the situation, but everything seemed to be sliding in a direction that she couldn't control. Yi Zhao said indifferently. It's literally what I said. He actually didn't care about this matter at all. Nan Yi felt as if her heart was being gripped tightly by something. Even breathing had become difficult for him. But in that case, then, isn't that Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix equivalent to betraying the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Could it be that you also, second Miss Nan, are you kidding? Elder EU interrupted her with a grin. Dumpling is the young master appointed by our ancestors and the next clan leader of our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Anyone can betray our clan, but she is the only one who can't. His indifferent words were tantamount to a heavy hammer that smashed fiercely into Nan Yi's heart. Her mind buzzed and instantly went blank. Young master, that Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was actually the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? And it was appointed by their ancestors? Then, she said so much just now, wasn't it all a joke in their eyes? Nan Yi's vision turned black and she fell to the ground. Second Miss. An elder was standing by the side. Seeing this, he hurriedly went forward and supported Nan Yi. Second Miss, are you all right? Nan Yi's legs went weak and she almost couldn't stand steadily. Her body was cold and her mind was in a mess. At this moment, she really wished that she would just faint. Everything that happened just now kept replaying in her mind, making her feel extremely embarrassed. She wished she could find a hole to hide in and never appear in front of these people again. To think that she had thought that by saying so much, she would be able to stir up a conflict between Yi Zhao and Sheng Guanyu. She had thought that she would be able to use this opportunity to destroy Sheng Haiyu once and for all. Who would have thought, Yi Zhao and the others had been standing on the same side as Sheng Guanyu from the very beginning. From the beginning to the end, she was the only one, a clown. What a joke. Nan Yi was trembling all over. Her face was pale and she looked miserable. Where was the dignity and arrogance of the second miss of the Nan family? Nan Yifan was also stunned by this sudden turn of events. He stood there for a long time without moving. He didn't know what to say or do. When Nan Yi said those words, he had a laissez-faire attitude. Although he didn't show his emotions on his face like Nan Yi, didn't he have the same thoughts as Nan Yi in his heart? At this moment, he couldn't be bothered to help Nan Yi. Because he himself was panicking. Young master, the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. He couldn't help but turn around. If he hadn't heard it with his own ears, who would believe that such a little girl was actually the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Countless thoughts flashed through Nan Yifan's mind. Before this, he had never heard of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan having a young master in the Divine Ruins world. Then this matter was very likely to have happened recently. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan did seem to have held an ancestral worship ceremony some time ago. If he didn't guess wrongly, it should be at that time, but this Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was Sheng Guanyu's contracted magical beast. How did she sit on the position of young master? Logically speaking, such an identity was a stain on the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was already good enough that she didn't become a sinner. How did she ascend to become the young master? Nan Yifan was extremely shocked and puzzled. But he didn't even have the qualifications or courage to ask this question. Earlier, Elder Yu had clearly said that the position of young master was personally appointed by their ancestor. He couldn't even afford to offend Yi Zhao, so how could he dare to question the ancestors of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? No wonder Yi Zhao, the clan leader, had personally made a move. How could he not be worried that something had happened to the young master? Previously, he felt that Yi Zhao and Nan Yifan were very concerned about the person they were looking for. But he never expected that the true identity of that little girl would be so shocking. Everything had become a hopeless situation. Yi Zhao looked coldly at Nan Yi. I forgot to say that Dumpling is a rare genius in our clan. She has the most noble bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, the purest bloodline. Saying that she had tarnished the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, was there anything more ridiculous than this? Nan Yi's eyes rolled back and she finally fainted. The elder at the side looked at Nan Yifan with a troubled expression. Patriarch, this, Nan Yifan clenched his fists tightly and almost gritted his teeth. He was no longer in the mood to care about Nan Yi's situation. Today, they had completely offended Wuxia and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was still unknown what kind of storm the entire Nan family would suffer. Fainted? Wuxia asked lightly. It's fine. With a wave of his sleeve, a black figure suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It was a puppet made entirely of black fine iron. It was tall and wore a suit of armor that was tough and iron-blooded. Golden flames were burning where its originally empty eyes were originally. The hearts of everyone present shuddered. The combat power of this puppet was probably extremely strong. Although there were no fluctuations of origin power around his body, that terrifying pressure was extremely frightening. Wuxia's voice was indifferent. Sky Demon, pry open her mouth. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1719. Upon hearing this order, the puppet immediately bowed respectfully. Then, with a tap of its foot, it charged towards Nan Yi. He was extremely strong, and with just a stomp, several cracks appeared on the ground. As for his figure, he was already like an arrow that had left the bow, flying away at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, he was already not far from Nan Yi. The elder supporting Nan Yi was shocked and immediately set up a barrier in front of him while retreating at the same time. However, these defenses couldn't even withstand a single blow from the puppet. Boom! He punched out, and the barrier instantly shattered. Violent energy surged in all directions. Some of it collided with the sky demon, but it didn't even leave a mark. God puppet! Nan Yifan's expression also changed. He immediately rushed forward and tried to stop the sky demon. However, the sky demon's speed was not inferior to his at all. In fact, his movements were even more agile. In a flash, he bypassed him and rushed directly in front of Nan Yi. Origin power surged around the elder's body. But before he could make a move, the sky demon had already kicked his wrist. Crack! The sound of bones breaking was especially crisp. Ah! That elder cried out in pain and unconsciously loosened his grip. Nan Yi was instantly snatched away by the sky demon. Nan Yifan's heart sank. The sky demon ignored him and used his elbow to clamp down on Nan Yi's neck, while his other hand pinched her chin tightly. The intense pain woke Nan Yi up again. When she came back to her senses, she realized that she was tightly clamped down. Her chin seemed to have been dislocated, and the sky demon's strength was extremely ruthless. This directly shattered half of her jawbone. She was forced to open her mouth, and cold air continuously poured into her lungs, causing her to feel cold all over. She had a bad feeling and started to struggle frantically. However, the sky demon's combat strength was extremely strong. Even at her peak, she was no match for the sky demon, let alone now. Then, something flew over quickly. Sharp. Boiling hot. Nan Yi felt her vision blur. Then, she heard something fall out and smash on the ground. Only then did the heavenly demon release her and return to Rongxiu's side in a flash. Nan Yi's body suddenly loosened and she fell to the ground. Her hand seemed to be pressing down on something. She turned her head stiffly. A piece of tongue with dark red bloodstains was lying quietly on the ground. It was still warm. Nan Yi was shocked. Then, an indescribable and terrifying pain came from his mouth. The thick smell of blood instantly filled his mouth. Nan Yi widened her eyes in horror. Her tongue. That was her tongue. Rongxiu had really cut off her tongue just now. Nan Yi let out a mournful cry as she sobbed. She wanted to say something, but all that came out of her mouth was a whimper. She couldn't say another word. Nan Yifan's face paled, his body swayed, and he almost fell. He had doted on Nan Yi since she was young. Now that he had to watch her tongue being cut off, how could he bear it? Blood kept flowing from the corners of Nan Yi's mouth and her face was filled with tears. She looked really miserable. The scene was dead silent. Other than her whimpering cries, there were no other sounds. Everyone was shocked by Rongxiu's straightforward move. No one expected that Rongxiu would actually do as he said. He said that he would cut off Nan Yi's tongue. Even if Nan Yifan and the rest stopped him, he would still do it. Rongxiu was a little irritated by her mournful voice. He narrowed his eyes dangerously. If you continue to make noise, I have ways to shut you up forever. Nan Yi's voice stopped abruptly. Her blood surged, her chest and abdomen churned, and more blood flowed from the corners of her mouth. However, after being glanced at by Rongxiu's deep and cold eyes, she didn't dare to make a sound. She had no doubt that Rongxiu would definitely do this. Luo Yan walked over quickly. Nan Yi looked at him without saying a word, but tears kept falling. Luo Yan's heart ached when he saw her like this. He took out a pill and fed it to her. But Nan Yi's mouth was full of blood and she was in so much pain that she couldn't swallow the pill. The veins on Luo Yan's forehead bulged, but in the end, he could only endure it. He wanted to take revenge on Rongxiu. However, this matter wasn't so easy. Not to mention that Rongxiu's strength had increased a lot, he still had many trump cards that he hadn't revealed yet. It was really difficult to do anything to him. Just the attitude of the family head was too much to think about. Nan Yi was his only daughter and he had doted on her for so many years. How could his heart not ache? But, until now, Nan Yifan hadn't done anything to Rongxiu. Coupled with his abnormal attitude when facing Rongxiu previously, one couldn't help but think more about it. Nan Yifan would never be so polite to someone for no reason, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he would swallow his anger. He seemed to be rather afraid of Rongxiu. What was he afraid of? Luo Yan didn't know. However, he understood that the things that were involved in this matter had definitely exceeded their expectations. So much so that Nan Yifan could swallow his anger. Besides, even if they disregarded everything and fell out with Rongxiu, then, what about the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? They were also on Sheng Guanyu's side. In other words, all the grievances and pain today, Nan Yi had to bear it even if she didn't want to. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1720. Boom. Just as the situation reached a stalemate, the sound of an intense energy collision was heard. It was Sheng Guanjing and Yu Hongshan fighting again. Yu Hongshan was already at a disadvantage. Now that he saw the Nan family suffer losses again and again, he had become the target of public criticism. He couldn't help but feel angry and anxious. He thought that by relying on Nan Yi and the Nan family, he still had some chance of winning today. Who knew that the remaining two parties were even more difficult to deal with? He didn't know what was so powerful about that Rongxiu. But Nan Yifan's attitude was enough to explain many things. Besides, there was also Yi Zhao. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan clearly wanted to side with Sheng Guanyu today. Sheng Guanjing was a Taizu from Sheng Guanyu, so they would naturally help. Now, he was already at the end of his rope. His psychological defense line collapsed, and Yu Hongshan's combat strength declined rapidly. Soon, he began to be defeated. Sheng Guanjing took advantage of the opportunity to pursue him and beat him fiercely. He vented all the grudges of the past 1,000 years. Not long after, Yu Hongshan made a huge mistake, and Sheng Guanjing seized the opportunity to give him a fatal blow. Bam! Yu Hongshan's translucent body finally exploded with this sound. Vanished into thin air. His soul was destroyed. Phew, Sheng Guanjing let out a long sigh. He didn't expect that Yu Hongshan had lived for more than 1,000 years in this black wall. But fortunately, all of this was finally over. The trace of unwillingness and anger that had accumulated in the depths of his heart finally dissipated with Yu Hongshan's complete death. For a moment, he was secretly glad that he had followed you, or here this time. Otherwise, how would he have the chance to settle these old matters? Sheng Guanjing looked up at Chu Luyue. Now, he only hoped that you could come out safely. Among those present, only the Nan family was suffering. Nan Yifan closed his eyes. The situation today was too unfavorable for them. They had no chance of winning if they forced it. The only thing they could do was to endure all of this. He walked to Nan Yi's side. When he saw Nan Yi's current state, his heart felt like it was being gripped tightly by something and it hurt terribly. However, even he had to admit that Nan Yi's fate today was, to a large extent, caused by herself. Of all people to offend, why did he have to offend Rongxiu? If she had only angered Rongxiu, he could still fight for her. However, her words had completely offended the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Nan Yifan was filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would never have let her come here. However, it was too late to say anything now. Let's go home. His voice was low and hoarse. Nan looked at him with empty eyes. Disappointment? No, it was despair. She thought that her father would protect her. But, no. Everything that had happened in the past seemed like a joke now. Now that she was being treated like this, he didn't even have the slightest intention of seeking justice for her. How could Nan Yifan not know what she was thinking? But he also had his difficulties. He couldn't possibly let the entire Nan family go against Wuxia and the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan for her, right? Moreover, she was clearly in the wrong this time. Even if word got out, they would be the ones in the wrong. Under such circumstances, what else could he do? Nan Yifan clenched his fists and his voice hardened. Luo Yan, take her back. Luo Yan closed his eyes and could only agree in the end. However, just as he was about to take Nan away, Nan suddenly started shaking her head frantically. Her face was full of rejection. Boo-hoo. She couldn't speak anymore. Every sound was like a heavy hammer that smashed into the hearts of everyone in the Nan family. She wasn't leaving. She definitely wasn't leaving. She wanted to stay here and see what Sheng Guanyu was up to. Anyway, she was already in this state. What difference did it make whether she left or stayed? Sensing her resentment, Luo Yan hesitated for a moment before turning to look at Nan Yifan. Patriarch, if you want to leave, you can leave directly. I'll stay here and accompany Yi. Nan Yifan was so angry that he felt suffocated. Was Luo Yan venting his anger on him as well? Was he having a good time? Nan Yuxing's pill of the essence had shattered and he was completely crippled. Nan Yi's tongue had been cut off and she had become a mute. As her father, wasn't he the one who was the most heartbroken? He suppressed the anger in his heart. Okay. Then we'll wait here together. We'll leave when she's willing to leave. The elders at the side wanted to comfort him, but the atmosphere was too cold and awkward. In the end, they chose to remain silent. No one cared whether they left or stayed. At this moment, Wuxia, Yi Zhao, and the rest's attention was already on Chu Luyue and Dumpling. Everyone had come out, and only the two of them were still trapped inside. And for some reason, the black wall had started to become transparent, which made them feel even more uneasy. After a period of time, more than half of the black wall in front of everyone had faded. That strange totem had also revealed its original appearance. Mysterious and unfathomable, overflowing with light, majestic and awe-inspiring. Chu Liyue's position was very subtle. Everyone looked from the outside and saw that she was right in the middle of the totem. She glanced at Nan Yi and retracted her gaze calmly, as if Nan Yi's life and death couldn't affect her at all. She threw away the paper in her hand. Her slender and delicate fingers moved gently, and another transparent paper flew over. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1721. What's that? Elder Yu couldn't help but ask softly. In fact, he wasn't the only one. Everyone present was very curious about this question. Although they could see Chu Luyue, they couldn't see where the paper went after she threw it away or where the new paper came from. The only thing they could see was that Chu Luyue seemed to be very focused on studying these things. As for what was written on the transparent paper, no one knew. Yi Zhao didn't answer Elder Yu's question. He just turned his gaze and glanced at Dumpling. Sensing his gaze, Dumpling opened her mouth and smiled brightly. Thank you, Grandpa Leader. She originally only felt that this place was very strange and was afraid that you would encounter some danger that she couldn't handle. Thus, she tried to send a message for help. She didn't expect them to really come. Although Dumpling looked young, she had been by Chu Liuyue's side for many years and was very mature. It wasn't that she didn't know what it meant for Grandpa Leader to come personally. Thus, she was very touched and grateful. Therefore, she was not stingy with her big smile. Seeing the bright smile on Dumpling's cute little face, Yi Zhao's heart suddenly felt as if it had been hit by something. It was very tender and loving. His expression didn't change much and was still very dignified. "Didn't I tell you before that if you encounter any danger, just say it? You're the young master. The clan will naturally do its best to save you." Elder EU stood at the side and glanced at him lightly. TSK. He clearly wanted to take the opportunity to improve his relationship with Dumpling, but he still said so much nonsense. Even if Dumpling wasn't the young master, he had to come personally. Of course, he definitely couldn't say this in front of him. He had to leave some face and dignity for the clan leader, right? Thus, Elder EU took a step forward with a smile and said, "Dumpling, don't worry. Grandpa Fifth Elder is waiting for you here." Dumpling nodded vigorously and clenched her little fists. "Yes. Grandpa Fifth Elder, wait for me." Elder EU was very satisfied when he saw the smile on her little face and heard her call him Grandpa Fifth Elder. It was worth it. Today's trip was really worth it. Elder EU couldn't help but move closer to Yi Zhao. He chuckled and couldn't hide his pride. "Clan leader, I see that Dumpling is very happy. Do you think I'll be able to hug Dumpling when she comes out this time?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. Yi Zhao looked at him coldly. "What are you daydreaming about?" He hadn't even hugged her yet, and now it was his turn. "Elder EU, if you want to hug me, say it yourself. If you don't say it, who will know? You're too embarrassed to say it, but you don't want others to think about it. Domineering. Unreasonable." Elder EU snorted and said, "That's right. That might not be a dream. But Patriarch, you always have a straight face. Aren't you being too serious? Which child would like it?" As he spoke, he retreated to the side. "If I stand here, Dumpling might not even come to hug me." Yi Zhao looked at him again. "EU, no one will treat you as a mute if you don't speak." Elder EU trembled. Then, he straightened his neck. Who's afraid of who? As long as Dumpling was happy, so what if the Patriarch was unhappy? Inside the wall, Chu Luyue threw away the paper in her hand again. The sound of the zither rang in her ears. She raised her eyes and looked forward. And, the last three. Digression, what's missing today will be made up for in tomorrow's update. Although it's lying in the draft box, it will still be published tomorrow, haha. Waving my little hands to beg for monthly votes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1722. She had barely managed to memorize half of the entire song. In addition, the more she listened to it, the more pain and torture she felt at the beginning. The current Chu Luyue could basically listen to the zither music calmly and flip through the zither scores in front of her. From over 10,000 copies to the last 3 copies, no one knew what kind of pain and suffering she had gone through in the process other than herself. But fortunately, all of this was finally coming to an end. The 3 transparent pieces of paper floated quietly in front of her. Chu Luyue held her breath and watched intently. Then, she chose the middle one. The moment she held it in her hand, the transparent paper shone brightly. However, Chu Luyue was already used to all of this as she calmly looked at it in detail. She was so focused that the onlookers outside couldn't help but quieten down, as if they were afraid of disturbing her. Nan Yifan stared at her for a while, his eyes full of scrutiny and suspicion, wandering back and forth between her and the transparent paper in his hand. He seemed to be suspecting something, but he wasn't sure. After thinking about it, he only felt a headache and had no choice but to rub his temples. Patriarch. A weak and low voice sounded. Nan Yifan turned his head to look, only to find that Elder Wu Peng had silently walked behind him without him noticing. Seeing that it was him, Nan Yifan's expression eased a little. Elder Wu Peng, what's the matter? Elder Wu Peng glanced at Nan Yi and said in a low voice. Patriarch, actually, Second Miss didn't mean to make things turn out like this. He had been with Nan Yifan for many years and could naturally tell that Nan Yifan felt sorry for Nan Yi, but at the same time, he also had some resentment. Originally, it was a good experience, but in the end, it turned out like this. This was something no one wanted to see. Nan Yifan thought that he was going to speak up for Nan Yi and frowned. Elder Wu Peng, since things have come to this, there are some things that really don't need to be said anymore. Patriarch, do you know why Second Miss has been chasing after them? Elder Wu Peng sighed. If it's really because of personal grudges, not to mention you, even I and eldest young master would never agree. These words made Nan Yifan's expression change slightly. He was well aware of Elder Wu Peng's character. It was indeed unlikely that he would allow Nan Yi to cause trouble. As for Nan Yuxing, although he was disappointed in his performance today, anyone who had their primordial core shattered and became a cripple wouldn't be able to calm down in a short period of time. So, there's really something else going on. Nan Yifan's expression became much more serious. If you have any difficulties, please tell me, Elder Wu Peng. Elder Wu Peng paused. The thing you asked second young mistress to find, seems to be on that Shangguan Yu. Nan Yifan's expression suddenly changed. First, he looked around to make sure that everyone's attention was on the Shangguan Yu. Then, he asked cautiously, really? Elder Wu Peng gently nodded. This old man has used the Great Star Catcher plate to deduce. Second young miss also sensed the aura of that thing on her body. There shouldn't be any mistake. Nan Yifan frowned and fell silent. If that was the case, then it was understandable why Nan Yi and the others had been chasing after Shangguan Yu. Why would that thing be on her body? Nan Yifan couldn't figure it out. I remember that you guys seem to have entered this god-slaying tomb together. Elder Wu Peng nodded as he briefly recounted the events that had transpired. Nan Yifan had mixed feelings. Previously, Nan Yi only said that there was some conflict between the two sides in the god-slaying tomb, but she didn't explain the cause and effect clearly. Now that Elder Wu Peng had explained it, many things could finally be explained. Although it was indeed Nan Yi and the others who had provoked the other party in the beginning. Later on, they had indeed been entangled with Shangguan Yu and the others in order to find that thing, and it was precisely because of this that they had been swept into the Black Wall. Some of them had died, and some of them had been injured. In that case, it wasn't entirely Nan Yi's fault. So you're saying that they were one step ahead of you and found that thing? Nan Yifan's expression was cold. Elder Wu Peng thought for a moment and shook his head. Actually, I feel that ever since they entered the god-slaying tomb, they didn't have much time to look for this thing, and from the beginning to the end, Shangguan Yu didn't seem to know what we were looking for. When she was fighting with Nan Yi at the end, what she said didn't seem to be false. Nan Yifan frowned. You mean, Elder Wu Peng didn't say anything for a moment and looked up. In the transparent space of the wall, the figure behind the totem sat quietly, determined and persistent. She seemed to have entered a meditative state, and no matter what happened outside, it couldn't cause the slightest ripple in her heart. At this moment, there were only a few transparent pieces of paper in her heart and in her eyes. Perhaps, that thing has always been with her. Chu Luiyue looked at the zither score in her hand. The light flowing on it transformed into notes that constantly overlapped with the sound of the zither in her mind. However, halfway through, it finally got stuck again. She sighed softly, as if she had already expected this result, and didn't show any disappointment. She just threw away the paper in her hand with a calm expression. There were 2 pieces left. She didn't even look at it and directly took the one on the right. Suddenly, she paused and looked up slightly. The space she was in was completely divided into two halves with her as the center axis. On the left, there was a thick darkness. On the right, there was a bright light. The people waiting outside were actually there at this time. So they could see her, and she could see them. And in the darkness on the left, there was a person and a zither. Senior Ah Jing. Chu Luiyue turned her face slightly and looked over. Although it was dark, she could still see a blurry figure at the end of the darkness. The sound of the zither stopped. A low and lazy voice sounded, and it seemed to be more provocative than the sound of the zither. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. It's been hard on you. Ah Jing smiled. Oh? Why do you say that? Chu Luiyue raised her hand and took the other one. If I'm not wrong, no matter which one I look at first, the result will be the same, right? A faint smile appeared on her lips. Whether these so-called zither scores are real or fake, it's all up to you, isn't it? No matter which one I leave behind in the end, it doesn't matter. Because the real zither score must be on the last one. What he wanted was for her to finish reading all the zither scores. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1723. Chu Luiyue heard her own voice echo. She looked around and saw that there seemed to be a transparent and invisible barrier around her that blocked her voice. Every time she spoke, she would see faint ripples on the barrier around her. Her heart skipped a beat. She guessed that Senior Ah Jing did not want the people outside to hear their conversation and set it up. Ah Jing was silent for a moment after hearing her words, then he laughed softly. With your intelligence, you should have guessed it long ago. Why are you only asking now? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. You must have your reasons for wanting me to finish reading it. Then she would do as she was told. At this moment, the only reason he asked this question was to seek an answer. Ah Jing's chuckle gradually turned into laughter. Ha ha ha. I was right about you. In this world, no one is more suitable than you to be the new owner of this Guqin score. For tens of thousands of years, the Guqin score had been divided into 3 parts and scattered around. Apart from this one, which had always been with him, the other 2 were nowhere to be found. He had been waiting for the Guqin score to choose a new owner, but he did not expect that the wait would be so long. The years were long. He had thought that he would not be able to wait any longer. But in the end, he did not let him down. Clang! Ah Jing plucked gently, and the Guqin sounded again. In that case, I'll help you one last time. Chu Luiyue knew that he was going to help her merge the Guqin score. She immediately restrained her expression and nodded seriously and respectfully. Thank you, Senior Ah Jing. The sound of the Guqin entered her ears. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and looked at the transparent paper in her hand again. She looked at the one on the right first. Chu Luiyue quickly finished reading that one amidst the desolate and austere sound of the Guqin. She calmly threw away that piece of paper and looked at the last one. On the transparent paper, dazzling flowing light shone brightly. Chu Luiyue stared at it and then took a deep breath. This was the real zither score. She focused and began to study it very carefully. The strange thing was that there were no words on this piece of paper, only a colorful halo. But as she looked at it, she inexplicably began to match the sound of the Guqin in her mind. Gradually, Chu Luiyue realized that every note of the tune began to be clearly engraved in her mind. She was pleasantly surprised by this discovery. She had listened to this tune countless times before, but she could not completely memorize it. But now, it seemed that she did not need to deliberately think about it. The tune automatically appeared in her mind. More importantly, she could faintly hear that there seemed to be countless minute changes in this melody, as if it had extended to countless possibilities, but she was still able to smoothly accommodate them all. Everything began to flow naturally. Finally, at a certain moment, the tune. Chu Liyue finally finished reading the last piece. Buzz. A strange ripple suddenly came from Chu Liyue's dantian. This fluctuation came from the transparent remnant page that was quietly floating in the air. Then, the Guqin score in Chu Liyue's hand suddenly turned into a ray of light and flew into her body. The damaged part of the original page was slowly recovering. The two transparent pages began to connect with each other. Chu Liyue quickly realized that there was a subtle connection between the two. This feeling was indescribable with words. It was majestic, vast, and full of life. They were all closely connected to each other. In the unseen world, there seemed to be a distant and boundless sound of the Guqin reverberating in her body. The force in Chu Liyue's body instantly began to flow rapidly. Then, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth began to crazily surge into her body. Chu Liyue was shocked and instinctively looked at Ah Jing. Senior Ah Jing, this is, Shu. Ah Jing raised a finger and placed it on his lips. In the darkness, Chu Liyue could not see his face and expression clearly, but she heard his voice clearly. It was low, lazy, and carried a hint of inattentive tiredness. There is a small crack in the fusion of the two Guqin scores. It needs to be repaired with the energy of heaven and earth. Just watch. Chu Liyue's pupils constricted slightly. There was a small crack, but how could it be repaired with the energy of heaven and earth? Moreover, the amount of energy needed was too shocking. Chu Liyue suddenly remembered that when the transparent remnant page was in her body, it had turned into a water droplet and acted as her core of essence. Its ability to devour energy was unparalleled. Now that the two pieces had merged into one, it would be even more shocking. Chu Liyue held her breath. She had never tested how much energy that thing could absorb before, but now it would be even more difficult. Chu Liyue closed her eyes and looked inside herself carefully. The two transparent pages were connected to each other, and the damaged part in the middle was indeed being repaired bit by bit. But, it was too slow. At this moment, her body was devouring the energy of heaven and earth around her at the fastest speed. The two thin transparent pages were like a bottomless pit, continuously accepting the energy from the outside, but there was no end in sight. Time passed slowly, and Chu Liyue became more and more shocked. The energy of this Guqin score was already very shocking, but the damaged part was only being repaired a little. The light around her seemed to be gradually brightening. Chu Liyue opened her eyes and looked around. On her left, the thick black was fading at an alarming speed. The bright light was gradually sprinkling down. It was as if an invisible hand had broken the invisible but real barrier in the middle. The light began to penetrate her left and right sides, and the energy began to merge. The wind suddenly blew. The energy of heaven and earth began to rush toward Chu Liyue. The crowd outside noticed this scene, but they didn't feel that anything was wrong at first. But as time passed, they gradually realized that Chu Liyue's body was like a bottomless pit that could easily accommodate all the energy. The abundant and terrifying energy that could cause an ordinary high god to explode and die after devouring all entered her body. Her expression didn't even change at all. Nanyi's expression became more and more unsightly, and her nails dug into her palms. How could this be? How could this be? Although she didn't know what Sheng Guanyu was doing, she still understood that a normal cultivator's body couldn't withstand so much energy. Even if Sheng Guanyu wanted to break through, it would be enough after absorbing so much energy. But, it had been so long, so why hadn't Sheng Guanyu stopped? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1724. Chu Ning frowned worriedly. Will you, really be alright? Just by standing there, he could already feel the powerful and majestic energy surging towards him, producing an astonishing pressure. It was as if something was pressing down on his chest, making it difficult for him to breathe. He wondered how who was in the center of the energy vortex, would feel. Compared to Chu Ning's worries, Shengguan Jing and Nan Su Huai were much calmer. Yu has always known her limits. She won't do anything that will endanger her life. You can rest assured. Nan Su Huai comforted. But in fact, he was also very puzzled. Is she planning to continue breaking through? It doesn't seem like it. Although there was a huge gap between a high god and a noble god, there was no detailed classification. Aside from the difference in divine power, there was also a difference in divine body. Therefore, there was a huge gap between a high god and a high god. But Shengguan Yu had just recalled her divine realm and became a high god not long ago. How could she try to break through to a noble god in such a short time? Even if she had the strength now, she wouldn't do it. She had always been smart and knew that breaking through rashly would do more harm than good. Moreover, she hadn't even condensed a divine body. How could she break through to a noble god? Shengguan Jing looked at her without saying a word. He had watched her grow up. No matter what she did, she must have her own plans. There was no need to worry about others. Nan Su Huai glanced at Rong Xiu and saw that he was as calm as usual. His hanging heart calmed down. He said to Chu Ning, "Don't worry. You will come out safe and sound." On the huge wall, with the totem as the center, the blackness had almost completely disappeared and was spreading to the sides. Chu Luyue sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees and her eyes closed. Her thick and long eyelashes cast a faint shadow on her face. Her side profile was beautiful and serene, but there was a noble aura that looked down on the world. Even if it was just a glance from afar, it still made people involuntarily feel reverence and submission, and they didn't dare to have any other thoughts. The energy between heaven and earth surged, and in the end, it all gathered into her body. That piece of damage was also gradually being repaired. Clang! The sound of the zither echoed in Chu Liuyue's mind. The two pieces of music finally merged perfectly and became a complete piece. Of course, there were still some damaged marks on one end. What was missing was obviously the third, which was also the last music score. However, 2/3 of the music scores were now gathered in her hands, and they all recognized her as their master. Even she was amazed by the power contained in this treasure. Soon, this much more complete zither score transformed back into a transparent water droplet. Compared to before, this water droplet was clearly a bit bigger. Furthermore, the water droplet was filled with a brilliant light. It was bright but not dazzling. It was extremely beautiful and moved one's mind. Suddenly, Chu Liuyue's glabella was boiling hot. Then, the huge totem on the wall suddenly transformed into a stream of light and flew into Chu Liuyue's glabella. In an instant, the totem shone brilliantly. An indescribably strong pressure spread out from Chu Liuyue's body. "Senior Shengguan, that totem, is it the bloodline inheritance of the Shengguan clan?" Nan Su Huai suddenly asked. Shengguan Jing shook his head. In order to have a totem, one must have an ancestor who had reached the peak. Only such a person would have the power of bloodline, and only then would the descendants be able to inherit it. However, in the Shengguan clan, he was a Taizu. Before him, there was no one who was as strong as him. As for why this totem appeared in Chu Liuyue's glabella, he really didn't know. Could it be because of some kind of inheritance here? Nan Su Huai stroked his beard with uncertainty. Regarding this matter, he would have to personally ask that lass. Nan Yifan slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves and gritted his teeth. If he still couldn't figure out what had happened by now, he would have wasted all his years. No matter if it was obtained before or found this time. In short, that thing was indeed in Shengguan Yu's possession. Moreover, it had completely become her possession. The fading color of the wall was enough to explain everything. Nan Yifan was so angry that he couldn't wait to rush forward and take it back. However, there were so many people watching him. If he made a move now, not only would he not be able to take it back, he might not even be able to get away. So, he had to endure it. A rusty aura quickly spread out from Nan Yifan's mouth. He wobbled and almost fell. Elder Wu Peng hurriedly held him up. Family head, you, Nan Yifan waved his hand, indicating that he was fine. Elder Wu Peng looked at his pale and haggard expression that couldn't hide his resentment. His lips moved, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He just sighed silently in his heart. In fact, after looking at this series of events, he already understood that it was clearly impossible for them to get that thing back. As the family head, Nan Yifan had suffered a series of blows today. Elder Wu Peng was actually very surprised that he could hold on until now. Nan Yuxing's pill of origin shattered and he became a cripple. Nan Yi's tongue was cut off in public and she was humiliated. In addition, Elder Bai Tong was sacrificed. No one would be able to bear so many things. Needless to say, Nan Yifan was still enduring until now. He was probably going to suffer internal injuries from holding it in. However, they really couldn't afford to offend the others present. Other than swallowing their anger and silently biting their teeth, there was nothing else they could do. Luo Yan looked at Nan Yi, whose eyes were red, and his heart ached. Now that we're done, let's go. The outcome was already decided. If he continued to watch, it would only make him sadder. Besides, you still have to go back and treat your injuries properly. A mocking sneer flashed across Nan Yi's eyes. Treatment? Given her current situation, there was no way to remedy it. She would become a mute for the rest of her life. Then, she looked at Sheng Guanyu. Her aura was astonishing and she was in high spirits. There wasn't even a trace of blood on her body. The two of them formed a stark contrast. How could Nan Yi stand it? Endless resentment surged in her eyes and she let out an unwilling whimper. Woo! It was so miserable that it made one's heart tremble. Luo Yan frowned. Given Nan Yi's current state, it was useless no matter how he tried to persuade her. It was better to leave this place first. He reached out his hand, intending to forcefully take Nan Yi away. A cold and pleasant voice suddenly sounded from behind. Wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1725. Even though he didn't mention any names, Luo Yan immediately and keenly sensed that this voice was calling them. He paused and turned back. A trace of vigilance and impatience appeared on his face. What else do you want to do? Don't you think you've harmed me enough? Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly and laughed softly as if she had heard a joke. Why do you say that, Senior Luo Yan? When did I harm Nan Yi? From the beginning to the end, weren't you the ones who pursued us relentlessly and wanted to kill us all? They had only carried out a counterattack, so why was the other party so relentless? Could it be that only you are allowed to win and bully others, and that it is a crime for others to resist and defend themselves? Luo Yan was speechless for a moment. He came over halfway and didn't know the cause and effect. After hearing Nan Yi's words, he was certain that everything was the other party's fault. But just now, he finally learned the truth from Elder Wu Peng and the others. Of course, he also knew that Nan Yi herself had to bear a large part of the responsibility for this matter. But he had always doted on Nan Yi and would unconsciously speak up for her in his heart. In addition, Nan Yi's current situation was too miserable. He really couldn't control himself and blamed all his resentment and anger on others. Chu Liuyue's gaze landed on Nan Yi. Nan Yi seemed to have sensed something and looked over as well. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Luiyue asked with a faint smile. Second Miss Nan, are you done crying? Nan Yi suddenly felt a chill in her heart. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave and it was bone-chilling. At this moment, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind, Shangguanyu, it's really scary. Her hysterical wailing stopped abruptly. Facing such a gaze, she couldn't even cry. Shangguanyu nodded in satisfaction. Looks like you've cried enough. This Nan Yi was really strange. His tongue had already been cut off by Rong Xiu for sowing discord and distorting the truth. Who would have thought that she was still unrepentant and even dared to cry in front of so many people? He really doesn't want to take my life. It finally quieted down. Chu Luiyue turned around and took a look. It was empty. All the darkness around her had gradually faded away when she had devoured the energy of heaven and earth to repair the music score. When she finished repairing the music score, the last bit of darkness was illuminated by the brilliant light. As for Senior Ah Jing, he disappeared as well. Chu Luiyue looked around. She was in a special space within the wall. The wall had become transparent, so the people outside could clearly see her figure, and she could also see everything outside. However, judging from their reactions, they probably didn't see Senior Ah Jing, let alone know of his existence. Chu Luiyue felt somewhat regretful. She knew that Senior Ah Jing had helped her a lot. In the end, she didn't even have the time to say thank you before they were separated. What a pity. She was silent for a moment, but quickly collected her emotions and turned to look at Dumpling. She waved her hand. Dumpling. Ah, you. Seeing that Chu Luiyue had finally finished everything smoothly, Dumpling heaved a sigh of relief. Then she rushed towards her excitedly and threw herself into her arms. She hugged Chu Luiyue's neck tightly with both arms and curled up in Chu Luiyue's arms, rubbing her cheeks intimately. Ah, you. Ah, you. Dumpling missed you so much. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed and she hugged her even tighter. I missed you too. For Tuanzi, perhaps only a few days had passed in the meantime. But for her, it had been decades. Senior Ah Jing had said before that she had read faster than expected, so it didn't take her 100 years. However, it was still decades. She didn't feel it before, but now that she was hugging Dumpling's soft little body and listening to her soft and coquettish voice, Chu Luiyue felt a long-lost longing in her heart. She weighed Dumpling in her arms and then took a step forward. The moment Chu Luiyue walked out of the wall, a breeze blew and rolled up the corner of her clothes. There seemed to be a fluctuation behind her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she looked back. The black color that had spread to the edge instantly scattered like thick ink. The stone that had become crystal clear not long ago was quickly dyed black. In less than a quarter of an hour, it returned to its original heavy and solemn appearance. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, no one would have believed that everything had happened here before. She stared at the black stone for a long time and silently said in her heart, "Thank you, Senior Ah Jing." Although no one answered, she still felt that Senior Ah Jing should be able to hear her. Everything around her finally returned to normal. Chu Luiyue turned around and walked forward. Nanny's body tensed up instantly. She was here. What was she going to do? She was already in such a sorry state, was she still unwilling to give up? Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Nanny's mind, causing her to feel terrified and nervous. Chu Luiyue walked over step by step. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. Nanny instinctively grabbed Luo Yen by the side, her face pale. Luo Yen patted her hand gently, then took half a step forward and blocked Nanyi with a cold expression. What else do you want? Chu Luiyue didn't stop in her tracks, as if she didn't hear his warning at all. Luo Yan's expression turned even colder. If you dare to do anything to Yi again, I won't be polite. You. Before he could finish speaking, Chu Luiyue had already walked in front of the two of them and continued walking forward without stopping. They brushed past each other. She didn't even look at Luo Yen and Nan Yi. The rest of Luo Yan's words were suddenly stuck in his throat, unable to go up and down. Chu Luyue walked for a while before putting Tuanzi down. Then, she solemnly and seriously bowed to Yi Zhao and the other man to thank them. Thank you, clan leader Yi Zhao and elder Yi Yu, for coming to the rescue. Yi Zhao's expression was indifferent. Since Dumpling asked for help, we naturally had to come. There's no need to thank us. Besides, we didn't do anything this time. Chu Luyue straightened her body, curved her lips, and smiled. Seniors, you're too polite. If they weren't here, the Nan family would definitely not let this matter rest so easily. She, on the other hand, had brought Dumpling to a false alarm and made them worry for a long time. She gently patted Dumpling's head and urged her softly. Dumpling, why aren't you thanking the two of them? Tuanzi nodded hard and then bowed to the two of them in a formal manner. Thank you, Grandpa Clan Leader. Thank you, Grandpa Fifth Elder. Looking at her cute little face, Yi Zhao's fingers twitched. Why did he feel like pinching her? Unfortunately, he was used to being serious and didn't know what to do. He really couldn't bring himself to do this. At this moment, Elder Yi Yu had already bent his legs slightly and opened his arms magnanimously. He chuckled at Tuanzi and said, Tuanzi, Tuanzi. Dumpling. Come and let Grandpa Fifth Elder take a good look at you. Are you injured? Compared to Yi Zhao and the other elders, Elder Yi Yu's attitude toward Chu Luyue and Dumpling was very good from the start. In addition, he had helped them a lot both openly and secretly, so Chu Luyue and Dumpling were naturally closer to him. Upon hearing Elder Yi Yu's words, Tuanzi didn't think too much about it and immediately ran over. In the blink of an eye, she was in front of Elder Yi Yu. She lifted her little face and turned left and right, revealing a big smile. Grandpa Fifth Elder, look. I'm fine. Dumpling was also very grateful for their arrival, so she wasn't stingy with her smile and enthusiasm. Elder Yi Yu's heart was about to melt. Ah! So cute! The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had never seen someone who could transform into a human at such a young age. Under normal circumstances, the juniors they saw were at least in their teens. But Dumpling looked like she was only 3 or 4 years old now. This was a completely different feeling. Even though they knew that Tuanzi had the purest bloodline and had opened the 4th meridian and was definitely one of the best in the younger generation, looking at her cute and petite appearance, they couldn't help but feel pity for her. They couldn't wait to hold her in their palms and give her all the best things in the world. Finally, Elder Yi Yu couldn't help but reach his hand forward, patting her hair bun tentatively and praising her sincerely. Dumpling is so awesome. Tuanzi chuckled. Then, it rushed forward and hugged Elder Yi Yu's thigh. Grandpa Fifth Elder is awesome too. She saw it just now. Those arrogant people from the Nan family were so respectful in front of Grandpa Fifth Elder and the rest. Elder Yi Yu. Yi Zhao. Digression, in the blink of an eye, it was the last day of 2019. She still remembered that she was thinking about opening a book at this time last year. A year's time flew by just like that. This year, I'm really grateful for everyone's company and support. Without all of you, there wouldn't be today's February. In the new year, the journey continues. I hope I can still be with all of you. Happy New Year. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1727. Rong Xiu's expression turned cold as he quickly grabbed her hand. The two figures disappeared at the same time. The collapsing void was quickly covered by a thick layer of darkness, completely concealing their tracks. You. Everyone present was shocked by this sudden scene, and they all cried out in alarm. However, it happened too quickly. Before they could react, they had already disappeared. Nan Su Hui frowned and was about to tear open the space again to follow them. Shengguan Jing stretched out his hand and stopped him. It's useless. The void here is shaking. Every space crack will lead to a different direction. Even if we tear open the space at the same place again, we won't be able to reach the same place as them. Shengguan Jing had been here before and could be considered the person who was most familiar with the world of divine ruins among the people present. If even he said so, then it proved that this method would not work. Then what should we do? Nan Su Hui's face was filled with anxiety. This person had just come out of the strange wall and had not said anything before he fell into the void again. No one knew where he went. The world was so big. How could they find him? Shengguan Jing also frowned and fell into deep thought. Actually, this is not the first time something like this has happened. 1,000 years ago, I came here with Yu Hongshan. He was the one who fought with me just now. Back then, a conflict broke out between us here. Due to various coincidences, he was sucked into the black wall and could never come out. As for me, I was swallowed by the void. When I came out, I was already in the northern region of the wilderness. You shouldn't be in fatal danger. Besides, Rong Xiao is with her. It's just. I'm afraid it will be a little difficult to find them immediately. His words silenced the crowd. The northern region of the wilderness. That was a very dangerous place. It was thousands of miles away from here. But this was not the most important thing. For them, even if it was the northern region of the wilderness or a place more dangerous than that, it was not impossible for them to go there. The most important thing was that they had to determine the location of Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao first. The divine ruins world was vast and boundless. Who knew where they had been sent to this time? Amidst the suffocating silence, a loud cry suddenly rang out. Ah! Ah, Yu is missing. Woo woo woo. Ah, Yu. The person crying was Dumpling. Shengguan Jing and the others looked at each other. Everything happened so suddenly that only Rong Xiao reacted the fastest and followed him. Dumpling, on the other hand, was nestled in Yi Zhao's arms, so she couldn't catch up with them immediately. As a result, she was left behind. Seeing Dumpling crying, Yi Zhao immediately panicked. He quickly raised his hand to carefully wipe away Dumpling's tears. His palm was thick and rough, even bigger than Dumpling's face. This action was particularly clumsy. Dumpling, don't cry, don't cry. Yi Zhao was also very anxious. When had he ever done such a thing? Usually, the clansmen were all respectful when they saw him. If anyone did anything wrong, Yi Zhao's reprimand was enough to put a lot of pressure on them. In short, no one dared to be presumptuous in front of Yi Zhao. However, Dumpling was different. On one hand, she didn't grow up in Phoenix Mountain, so she had never seen Yi Zhao's dignity and power. On the other hand, she had been with Chu Luyue for a long time, so her personality had become casual and she wasn't afraid of Yi Zhao's anger at all. If she was afraid, she wouldn't have confronted them head-on in the Phoenix Temple. As a result, Tuanzi burst into tears. Yi Zhao had a headache. Now, not only did he have to carry her, but he also had to coax her. Dumpling's crying made him feel extremely uncomfortable, but he didn't know how to comfort her. Hence, he glared at Elder Yu angrily. What are you looking at? Come over and think of a way to coax her. Elder Yu, who was inexplicably angered, was stunned. You were the one who hugged her when you were hugging her. Now that you're coaxing her, you're thinking of me. However, he couldn't afford to offend either of them. Furthermore, he also felt terrible when he saw Dumpling crying. Elder Yu had no choice but to swallow his words. He pondered for a moment and coaxed, Dumpling, don't cry first. Let's see if we can sense where they are now. If we can find any clues, we can go and look for them directly. After all, there's a contract between them. Hearing this, Dumpling stopped crying. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and nodded while sobbing. Then I'll try. Everyone, including Shengguan Jing, looked over. Obviously, all their hopes were placed on Dumpling. Dumpling closed her red eyes, held her breath, and began to seriously search for traces of Chu Luyue. Fortunately, they were no longer within the black wall, so the connection between her and Chu Luyue was not broken. It was just that this connection was really a little illusory and difficult to grasp. After a while, Dumpling opened her eyes and frowned. Seeing her expression, everyone already had an answer in their hearts. However, Elder EU still asked a question. Dumpling, how is it? Did you find anything? Dumpling shook her head. You seems to still be in the void turbulence. I can't accurately determine her direction and location for the time being. Everyone looked at each other. That's true. If she was really sent from here to somewhere thousands of miles away, it would probably take a long time. Dumpling clenched her small fists. I'll continue to search. I'll definitely find Yu. As long as Chu Luyue arrived somewhere, she would be able to find him very quickly. In the face of Tuan Zi's decision, no one had any objection. Yi Zhao put Dumpling down so that she could focus on searching for Chu Luyue's aura. Dumpling sat cross-legged and closed her eyes again. The others present also subconsciously held their breaths and quietened down, patiently waiting for Dumpling's answer. On the other side, Chu Luyue felt that there was nothing under her feet and her body fell back uncontrollably. Immediately, she felt a broad and warm hand grab her wrist tightly. The surroundings instantly fell into darkness. And she was also pulled back by this hand and fell into a familiar embrace. A faint cold fragrance instantly filled her nose, making Chu Luyue relax a lot. Rongxiu? Rongxiu responded in a low voice. His voice was exceptionally low as he wrapped one arm around her slender waist and hugged her tightly. Chu Luyue was surprised for a moment. Rongxiu's movement seemed to be much faster than before, and the aura on his body, she didn't have the time to take a closer look at him just now. Now that she was closer, she realized that he seemed to have changed a little. She raised her head slightly and asked with some uncertainty. You? How did you catch up? You broke through? Rongxiu lowered his head, gently grabbed her waist, and pushed her up. Then, he easily found her soft and sweet lips in the darkness. The vague syllables with a smile disappeared between his lips. Chasing you is what I'm best at and most passionate about. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1728. Rongxiu had originally wanted to stop after tasting her, but her lips were too soft, and her breath was too sweet. He almost couldn't help but linger on. After going back and forth a few times, he heard her slightly hurried panting. Only then did he restrain himself and stop. He tilted his head slightly and rested his chin on her shoulder. His hot breath fell on her slender and delicate neck, causing a slight shudder. The hand that was holding her slender waist seemed to have tightened a lot more than before. His body was tense, and he half leaned on her like this. After a while, he let out a long sigh and couldn't help but chuckle. You really reap what you sow. The self-control that he was so proud of always crumbled in front of her. Chu Luyue's cheeks were slightly hot. Your Highness Holy Son, your heart is really big. Even at this time, you're still thinking about this? Rongxiu turned his head, and his lips lightly brushed against her cheek. His warm breath fell on her ear, and Chu Luyue could even hear the subtle flow of the surrounding air. Rongxiu's voice was extremely low and seductive. He said frankly and ambiguously. It's been so long since you went to Phoenix God Mountain. If I said I didn't want to, I would be lying. His voice was a little hoarse, and mixed with a scorching breath. It was especially easy to make people blush and their hearts beat faster. However, his tone was so frank and upright, and also carried a little obvious grievance. On the contrary, Chu Luyue didn't know how to respond. She stretched out her finger and tapped on his broad and firm chest, changing the topic. This place is dangerous, your highness should be more careful. Rong Xiao laughed, then straightened up, held her hand, and looked around. It was dark all around them, but there was a light golden barrier around the two of them. Rong Xiao had conveniently set it up when the two of them fell here. The violent turbulence around them was isolated, and the two of them could be said to be calm within the boundary. But the most unsettling thing was that they didn't know where they were going. Chu Luyue said, Taizu said before that he was sent directly to the northern territory of the untainted land 1,000 years ago. I wonder, where will we be sent to this time? Rong Xiao smiled. The faint light shone on his face, only revealing his calm and noble demeanor. It's still somewhere in the divine ruins world. His tone was relaxed and carried a hint of indifference. He didn't seem to take this matter to heart. Hearing his tone, Chu Luyue could not help but turn to look at him. That's right. There's something I forgot to ask you. Rong Xiao nodded. Ask away. Chu Luyue pursed his lips slightly. The Nan family's position in the divine ruins world should be higher than the Yuntian Tower, right? But when Nan Yifan saw you, why was he so? She paused for a moment and thought for a long time. She didn't know what words to use to describe it. You want to ask why Nan Yifan is so afraid of me? Rong Xiao answered her with a smile. Chu Luyue nodded. Afraid, this word sounded too straightforward, but it was indeed accurate. Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rong Xiao was indeed too strange. After Nan Yi and the others found out about Rong Xiao's identity, they didn't take it to heart. From the beginning to the end, they were all high and mighty, obviously relying on the Nan family's confidence. However, as the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan's expression immediately changed when he saw Rong Xiao. After that, not only did he swallow his anger and apologize, he even endured Rong Xiao cutting Nan Yi's tongue in public. If he wasn't afraid of Rong Xiao, it would be strange. But, why? Rong Xiao was the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, and now had great power and a noble status. But in the divine ruins world, Yuntian Tower wasn't the only one. Chu Luyue hadn't heard of this Nan family before, but it was obviously more powerful than Yuntian Tower. Then, there must be other more powerful sects that she didn't know about. To be able to make Nan Yifan act like this, Rong Xiao definitely had other trump cards in his hands. Actually, the reason is very simple. I've dealt with him before, and he suffered a loss because of me. Moreover, I have something on him, so, when he sees me, he naturally has to take the initiative to avoid me. Rong Xiao's tone was very calm, as if he was talking about something very ordinary. Chu Luyue was secretly shocked. Who was Nan Yifan? His intelligence, methods, and strength were all top-notch. He actually suffered a loss at the hands of Rong Xiao, and even had something on him in the hands of Rong Xiao. Then, it could only mean that Rong Xiao was too heaven-defying. Chu Luyue had always thought that she was good at tricking people, but at this moment, compared to Rong Xiao, it was still unknown who was stronger and who was weaker. Seeing that Rong Xiao was too lazy to talk about the past, Chu Luyue didn't ask in detail. She could tell that Rong Xiao really didn't take this matter to heart. In other words, he didn't put Nan Yifan in his eyes at all. Chu Luyue had a very subtle feeling in her heart. She had long known that Rong Xiao was powerful, and could even be said to be unfathomable. She had already realized this when they first met. But now, she felt that she had still underestimated him. Suddenly, the barrier beside the two of them shook violently. Chu Luyue's thoughts were interrupted. Rong Xiao raised his gaze slightly and looked forward. It's time to go out. Chu Luyue followed his gaze and saw that the stagnant darkness suddenly fluctuated. Then, a bright white light shone out from it. The surrounding turbulence became even more violent. Rong Xiao's barrier also began to shake more. Chu Luiyue only felt that the surrounding power began to crazily squeeze towards her. Rong Xiu pulled her into his arms. The next moment, the sky brightened up. The two of them flew out in an instant. Bang! As soon as Rong Xiu landed with her in his arms, he heard the sound of something shattering. The dazzling sunlight made it difficult for Chu Luiyue to adapt to. She subconsciously narrowed her eyes, then looked down in the direction of the sound. Beneath her feet, a jade plate had been shattered into pieces. It seemed that when they came out just now, Rong Xiu stepped on it and it became like this. Fortunately, Rong Xiu's boots were of excellent quality, so it was not damaged. Chu Luiyue breathed a sigh of relief. However, before she could finish her breath, she acutely sensed that the surrounding atmosphere was not right. It was too quiet. The air seemed to have solidified, but there was also a strong murderous intent, silently covering the sky and earth. Chu Luiyue raised her head stiffly and looked around. When she saw the scene around her clearly, she suddenly gasped in shock, and her pupils shrank. This was, almost at the same time, Dumpling, who was far away in the God-Slayer mound, suddenly felt something and opened her eyes. Her eyes were bright, and she excitedly raised her hand and pointed in a certain direction. Ah, you is over there. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. He looked at Yi Zhao in disbelief, wondering if he had heard wrongly. What did the clan leader say? He wanted to escort Dumpling all the way? Didn't that mean he was going to continue to act with Sheng Wanjing and the others? Nan Su Huai and the others were also very surprised. According to their understanding of Yi Zhao, the latter didn't seem like someone who would be willing to act with them at all. Moreover, his identity was special. If this matter were to spread, it would definitely cause a big storm in the entire Divine Ruins world. Needless to say, this was definitely for Dumpling's sake. Nan Su Huai and the others looked at each other, and then at Dumpling in unison. After all, she was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Her treatment was indeed different. Moreover, they could also see that Yi Zhao really doted on Dumpling. He was even willing to make these compromises for her. Nan Su Huai nodded. Clan leader Yi Zhao, please. Yi Zhao looked at Dumpling. Dumpling pointed ahead excitedly. Over there. Dead silence. Chu Luiyue's eyes quickly scanned the surroundings. At this moment, she and Rong Xiu were standing on a huge square, and it was right in the middle. On the left and right, there were a few rows of people sitting neatly. At a glance, all of them were unfamiliar faces. Most importantly, the aura on these people was extremely powerful. Just by standing there, Chu Luiyue felt that it was a little difficult to bear the pressure. The countless pairs of eyes that were filled with scrutiny, suspicion, and hostility made her even more uneasy. These people were not humans. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. She was certain that these people were definitely not humans. The aura on their bodies was somewhat familiar. Chu Luiyue slowly clenched her fists. An answer was on the verge of coming out. The Great Phoenix Dragon. It's you guys. Suddenly, a familiar voice was heard. Cold, gloomy, and with a trace of undisguised unwillingness and resentment. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly and turned her head to look. In the crowd, a gloomy face came into view. It was Mao Yao. He sat in a relatively remote corner of the second row, very inconspicuous. In addition, during this period of time, he had become haggard and thinner, and he no longer had the high-spirited and proud appearance from before. That was why Chu Luiyue did not recognize him at first. But at this moment, when she heard this voice and met that gaze, Chu Luiyue immediately confirmed his identity. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. Mao Yao was here, and the surrounding people seemed to be great phoenix dragons, then this place was Divine Dragon Island. Rong Xiu's low and calm voice rang in her ears. He laughed, as if he found it quite interesting. I didn't expect that this time, we would actually come here. Chu Luiyue heard that he was actually in the mood to laugh, and the corners of her eyes twitched violently. Divine Dragon Island. Wasn't that the lair of the great phoenix dragons? They had really barged into a tiger's den. The great phoenix dragon clan was also an ancient divine beast, and they were also extremely arrogant. Although their attitude towards humans was slightly more polite than the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, they had never allowed humans to enter their territory. In all these years, there had never been any news of someone barging into Divine Dragon Island in the Divine Ruins world. Chu Luiyue once again carefully examined her surroundings. This solemn and dignified atmosphere, this group of people gathered together, everything was showing that not only had the two of them come to Divine Dragon Island, but it seemed that they had come at a particularly bad time. Senior Mao Yao, how have you been? Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly as she greeted him with ease. It was as if the various battles in the past had never existed. When Mao Yao saw the two of them, he was already furious. At this moment, when he saw the smile on Rong Xiu's face, he was even more furious. Good. The guts of these two people were really big. It was fine if they treated him like that before, but now, they actually dared to barge into Divine Dragon Island. Everyone stared at Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu curiously. Someone asked, Elder Mao Yao, do you know these two people? Mao Yao was so angry that he laughed and sneered, I know them. Of course I know them. These two people are the famous Holy Son of the Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiu. And the one beside him, is Shengguan Yu. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1730. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone's expressions changed at the same time. Most of them had heard of Rong Xiu's name before. More importantly, the woman beside him was actually Shengguan Yu. Recently, her name was much more famous than Rong Xiu on Divine Dragon Island. Shengguan Yu? Isn't that the person from Lingshao College? That's her. I heard that Shengguan Jing is her taizu. After Shengguan Jing took away our clansman's corpse, it fell into her hands. She was also the one who injured Elder Mao Yao. This, seems like her strength is only at the exalted god level? Elder Mao Yao is so powerful. How could he have suffered such a big loss at her hands? Shoo. Lower your voice. Can't you see that Elder Mao Yao's expression is already very ugly? But I'm also telling the truth. I'm just curious. What's so powerful about this Shengguan Yu? What's so powerful? Heh, she came directly to Divine Dragon Island today. How can an ordinary person have such courage? That's true. But now that she's here, I'm afraid Elder Mao Yao won't let her off so easily, right? Everyone discussed animatedly. Even though they had lowered their voices, everyone present was an expert with extraordinary five senses. How could they not hear it? Mao Yao clenched his fists tightly, and the veins on his forehead bulged. These people's words were too unpleasant to hear. If it were in the past, even if they thought so, they would definitely not dare to say it directly in front of him. But it was different now. In this 1,000 summit, he was directly removed from the affairs in charge, and the power in his hands was quickly divided up by the other elders. In addition, after he was injured last time, he had not been able to fully recover. Now, his status in the clan was much worse than before. The attitude of these clansmen towards him naturally became disrespectful. Mao Yao could not take it anymore. In the end, he pushed all the blame to the woman not far away. If it were not for her, he would not have been reduced to such a state today. Shengguan Yu should pay back all the torture he had suffered 10 times, 100 times. Seeing the undisguised hatred and resentment in Mao Yao's eyes, Chu Liuyue's originally nervous mood inexplicably relaxed a lot. Anyway, what was the use of being nervous now since she had already thoroughly offended the great Phoenix Dragon tribe? She might as well face it calmly and see what they could do. Thinking of this, the pressure in Chu Liuyue's heart lessened. Her red lips slightly, Elder Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, long time no see. I didn't expect you to still remember me. Mao Yao was so angry that he almost choked. What the hell was that? In Shengguan Yu's ***T, in the end? Elder Mao Senior's words. He sneered and clenched his teeth. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth, carrying deep resentment and hatred. Not only do I remember you, but I also remember everything that you've done to me. In other words, he had not forgotten any of the scores between them. Chu Liuyue's smile deepened, as if she did not understand the deeper meaning in his words. Thank you for your concern. You. Mao Yao's face was ashen. He finally could not hold back and suddenly stood up. Shengguan Yu. How dare you? Before Chu Liuyue could say anything, she heard a calm and dignified voice from beside her. Mao Yao. Mao Yao's expression changed when he heard this voice. Finally, he gritted his teeth and sat down again. However, his eyes were still fixed on Chu Liuyue. If eyes could turn into knives, Chu Liuyue would have been cut into pieces. Chu Liuyue turned her head in surprise. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. His appearance was very ordinary. At a glance, there was nothing special about him. However, he was sitting at the head of the table. His identity was obviously not ordinary. Chu Liuyue's heart trembled slightly. This man, just as she was hesitating, Rongxiu had already taken a step forward, cupped his fists, and bowed politely. Clan leader Mao Yang, I've long heard of your name. Meeting you today, you really live up to your reputation. It was indeed him. Chu Liuyue knew this name. Ever since Dumpling had broken through to become a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, she had been paying close attention to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan and read a lot of information about them. In the process, she also learned a lot about the Great Phoenix Dragon. Among them was the current clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon, Mao Yang. Speaking of which, Mao Yang was also an extremely legendary figure. It was rumored that his talent was not high. He was just an ordinary existence in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Then, one day, for some unknown reason, his bloodline power suddenly soared, and he became the top genius of the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Since then, his talent and diligence made him more and more outstanding. In the end, he successfully became the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. There was only a difference of a few decades between him and Yi Zhao. To them, this time gap was very small. Therefore, almost everyone, including themselves, regarded each other as their opponents. The relationship between the two ancient divine beasts was subtle, so it was inevitable that the two clan leaders would be compared. Unfortunately, Mao Yang and Yi Zhao had never really fought, and the number of times they had met could be counted on one hand. It was difficult for everyone to guess who was the stronger one. After seeing Yi Zhao, Chu Liuyue couldn't help but secretly compare the two of them in her heart when she saw Mao Yang. They were indeed very different. Yi Zhao was serious and cold, revealing the pride in his bones. As for Mao Yang, his expression was gentle, and he looked much easier to get along with than Yi Zhao. Hearing Rongxiu's words, he also smiled and said, "Everyone says that the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, Rongxiu, is extraordinarily talented and charming. Today, I see that you are indeed extraordinary." His words were very polite and his attitude was very calm. However, Chu Liuyue secretly frowned in her heart. Although she couldn't tell exactly what it was, she just felt that there was something wrong with this Mao Yang. After all, he was the clan leader of the great Phoenix Dragon clan. His status was noble and high, so why did he have to be so polite to them? Moreover, this kind of politeness was different from the respect and fear that Nan Yifan had when facing Rongxiu. It seemed that this was indeed the first time Mao Yang and Rongxiu had met. In that case, his attitude was even more bizarre. This is Shangguanyu? Mao Yang's gaze fell on Chu Luyue. His gaze was sharp and tangible, as if he could see through everything. However, he didn't make anyone feel uncomfortable or offended. Chu Luyue became more and more vigilant. This Mao Yang is not simple. He is definitely not as gentle as he looks on the surface. However, these thoughts only flashed through her mind quickly, and she didn't show it on her face. Junior Shangguanyu greets clan leader Mao Yang. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1731. Chu Luyue bowed politely. Mao Yang's eyes lingered on her for a moment before he quickly looked away. May I know, why did you suddenly visit today? Mao Yang asked tactfully. Everyone present clearly saw that the void above the square had suddenly swayed and collapsed. Then, the two of them had suddenly appeared. One must know that they set up layers of barriers around the Divine Dragon Island. Even their own clansmen couldn't enter and leave at will, let alone humans. However, these two people seemed to have completely ignored those obstacles and directly shattered the void to come here. It was really hard not to be suspicious. It's a long story. Rongxiu smiled, but his expression was still calm. After that, he gave a simple explanation of what had happened in just a few words. Of course, he directly skipped over many of the details. After that, everyone present quieted down with different expressions on their faces. But obviously, most of them were still suspicious. Even Mao Yang had a surprised look on his face. So you're saying that you somehow came here from the god-slaying mound? Rongxiu nodded. And I didn't mean to come here. If we offended you, please forgive us, Patriarch Mao Yang. Looking at his incomparably sincere expression, Mao Yang was speechless. He had thought of many possibilities, but this was the only one he didn't think of. This sounded too strange. But if he didn't experience it personally, how could he say such a reason? Moreover, with the strength of these two people, it was impossible for them to quietly break through their defenses and come in directly. In other words, what Rongxiu said was true. Of course, Mao Yang didn't believe all of it, but he also felt that what Rongxiu said should be partly true. Mao Yang fell into silence. It was almost impossible for outsiders to verify these things. Whether it was true or not, it was all up to them. Rongxiu's status was not low, so obviously they couldn't take his life. However, since they had suddenly come here, they had to bear the punishment that they deserved. After a while, Mao Yang said, Actually, we didn't mean to make things difficult for the two of you. It's just that you interrupted our 1,000 peaks and even stepped on the jade disc that we used for testing. I'm afraid this debt will have to be settled properly. 1,000 peaks? Chu Luyue was stunned for a moment before he quickly came to his senses. No wonder. She was wondering why so many people were here. It turned out that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race was holding the 1,000 Summit. The so-called 1,000 Summit was actually similar to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestral worship ceremony. Every 100 years, the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe would hold a 1,000-peak summit to test the innate talents of the younger generation of the tribe. This could be considered one of the biggest ceremonies in their clan, and it was incomparably important to them. Now that she and Rongxiu had interrupted them, it was no wonder that they were so angry. This Mao Yang was really good at self-restraint. He was actually able to say these words so calmly. If it was Yi Zhao, suddenly, Chu Luyue's expression froze. A sense of uneasiness quickly surged into her heart. Since this thousand-peak summit was similar to the ancestral worship ceremony, then outsiders should not be allowed to casually appear here. She and Wuxia had gotten into big trouble. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would definitely not let this matter go so easily. And that jade disc, Chu Luyue lowered her head to take another look. Clan leader Mao Yang, this jade disc, Mao Yang said indifferently. Actually, this jade disc isn't considered a top-notch treasure. It's just that our tribe only has this one now. After it's damaged, it's extremely difficult to refine another one that's exactly the same. Chu Luyue's breathing stagnated. Although Mao Yang's tone was very calm, she could also hear the preciousness of this item. It was the only one. And it was a treasure that was specially used for the Thousand Peak Summit. And it was crushed by them just like that. If she didn't compensate them properly, she would feel that it wasn't right. However, the two of you didn't do it on purpose. This clan leader, why are you so polite to the two of them? In my opinion, they were clearly doing it on purpose. Mao Yao tried to restrain himself, but in the end, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up again with a furious expression. He raised his finger and pointed at Chu Luyue, gritting his teeth as he said word by word, especially this Shengguanyu. They're very sinister and cunning. How can there be such a coincidence in this world? They came directly from the god-slaying tomb thousands of miles away to our divine dragon island. Furthermore, he had coincidentally stepped on the jade disc and shattered it. Everyone nodded in agreement. Although Mao Yao was a little agitated at this moment, what he said was not without reason. This series of events was really too coincidental. It was hard for anyone to believe it. Chu Luyue's lips curled into a cold arc when she heard this. She turned around and stared at Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, you have to have evidence before you speak. Don't you think it's a little too much for you to accuse us without any evidence? If you insist on what you said just now, then do I have reason to suspect that you're abusing your position to avenge a personal grudge? Just because I won the bet and caused you to be heavily injured, you hold a grudge against me and want to take this opportunity to slander us? Mao Yang's face turned pale. You! What a glib tongue! When he first met this Shengguanyu, he already knew how powerful she was. However, that was when he was at Lingxiao College. Now that she was on Divine Dragon Island, their territory, she was still as arrogant as ever. This was ridiculous. Ridiculous. Mao Yao's chest heaved violently. His hand that was pointing at Chu Luyue trembled slightly. Then, he waved his sleeves fiercely. Then explain yourself. What's going on? If you can give us an explanation and show us evidence, we'll believe you. Otherwise, you're doing this on purpose. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes and felt a little irritated. She also did not expect that she would actually be sent to this divine dragon island. Did they think she wanted to come? She couldn't wait to cut off all contact with the great Phoenix Dragon clan. However, it seemed that this had become an extravagant hope. Mao Yao's words are not without reason. In the silence, Mao Yang spoke again. His expression was still gentle, and there was nothing strange about it. His words, however, gradually became sharper. After all, the Thousand Summit is the grandest event of our clan. Because of this, the entire clan had been working tirelessly so that the 1,000-year summit could be held smoothly. But now, everything has become an illusion. Even if the two of you really didn't mean it, you're not completely without responsibility, right? Of course. Wuxia replied calmly. He raised his chin slightly, and his jawline was smooth. There was a smile at the corner of his lips, but there was calmness between his brows. He was just standing there, but his entire body exuded an indescribable noble aura, making people subconsciously look up and submit to him. If we're in the wrong, we'll take responsibility and never shirk responsibility. Digression, Happy Origin Core. Happy first anniversary, godly doctor. I hope that everyone will be healthy and happy in the new year. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1732. As soon as he finished speaking, Mao Yao sneered. Bear the responsibility alone? With just you two? What big words! Let's not talk about anything else, just that jade disc alone. Can you compensate us with an identical one? How are you going to bear the responsibility of delaying the Thousand Peaks Summit? Rong Xiu glanced at him, the smile on his lips fading a little. I, Rong Xiu, have always done what I say. There's no need for others to worry about this. Mao Yao's heart felt stifled, and his anger burned even more. This Rong Xiu was not someone to be trifled with. The two of them together could simply infuriate people to death. Mao Yang gave Mao Yao a look. Mao Yao, don't be agitated. Maybe they really have a way. Mao Yao did not dare to disobey his words. He could only snort coldly and swallow the rest of his words. Mao Yang looked at Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue, his eyes sweeping across the two of them. Actually, we don't want to make a big deal out of this matter. After all, it won't be good for either of us. How about this, if you have a way to repair this jade disc within an hour, we'll forget about the broken jade disc. How about it? As soon as he finished speaking, the huge square became even quieter. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the two people in the square. Good wife, suspicion, ridicule, everyone had different expressions, but in the end, they all had the attitude of watching a joke. Because they all knew very well, in this world, there was absolutely no one who could complete this task within an hour. Even the top craftsmen of the human race could not do it. Let alone these two people. Is Patriarch Mao Yang's words true? Rong Xiu seemed to be unaware of the surrounding gazes as he asked faintly. Mao Yang nodded. Of course. In front of so many people, every word he said was carefully considered. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. Good. Since that's the case, then. I'll have to ask you and everyone else to wait for an hour for now. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. What did Rong Xiu mean by this? Could it be that he could really restore the jade disc to its original state within an hour? Where did his confidence come from? Chu Luiyue stepped forward and held his hand. Rong Xiu turned around and looked at her with a smile. Their eyes met. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly calmed down. Rong Xiu could do it. Even if no one believed it, she believed it. Rong Xiu indeed had such an ability. Then, Rong Xiu walked to the side and picked up the broken plate. Lend me something. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What? Rong Xiu said, the corpse of the great phoenix dragon. The corners of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. What did Rong Xiu want to do with this thing? Her eyes unconsciously fell on the jade plate that had shattered into several pieces, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in her heart. This was Divine Dragon Island. It was one thing for them to suddenly appear here, but if they took out the corpse in front of so many people, wouldn't they be looking for trouble? However, looking at Rong Xiu's calm and composed appearance, Chu Luiyue only moved her lips, but in the end, she nodded. With a flick of her wrist, a stream of light flashed. Then, a long skeleton appeared in Chu Luiyue's hand. The skeleton was translucent and glowed with a jade-like luster. However, the moment this thing appeared, the entire square was in an uproar. They were all great phoenix dragons, so they were naturally familiar with the aura of this skeleton. Shangguan Yu. How dare you? Mao Yao's eyes widened in anger as he reprimanded angrily. Even Mao Yang's eyes, which had always been gentle, turned cold at this time. Shangguan Yu, Rong Xiu, what are you trying to do? His voice was low and dignified, and every word fell into the ears like a clap of thunder. Chu Liuyue's heart trembled, and the force in her body instantly began to surge. Rong Xiao held her hand. A gentle and majestic aura flowed into her body, quickly calming the force in her body. Chu Liyue exhaled softly. Although her strength had improved, she was still a high god. Facing a top expert like Mao Yang, she was naturally no match for him. Rong Xiao took the corpse in his hand, then raised his eyes and looked at Mao Yang. There was a faint smile on his noble and devilish face, and his voice was lazy and carried a hint of indifference. Clan leader Mao Yang, why are you so nervous? I'm just borrowing this corpse to repair the jade disc. He didn't seem to care at all, but every word he said struck at the heart of Mao Yang and the others. Of course, they knew that Shengguanyu had the corpse of one of their clansmen with her. Moreover, she had used this corpse to reconstruct the physical body of her contracted divine beast. If not for this, Mao Yao would not have barged into Lingxiao College and questioned her. Unfortunately, the outcome of that incident was not very good. Mao Yao lost the bet, and at the same time, he lost the right to continue asking for the corpse. This was a large part of the reason why the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan's attitude towards Mao Yao had changed. If the corpse was not taken out, it would be fine. They could still put on a show of politeness. But now, the corpse was right in front of them. How could they tolerate this? Mao Yang was secretly shocked when he saw that Rong Xiao easily neutralized his coercion. He did not use his full strength just now. He only wanted to put some pressure on them, but he still used 50% of his strength. An ordinary high god expert would definitely not be able to withstand it. However, this did not seem to cause any trouble for Rong Xiao at all. Rong Xiao's strength seemed to be stronger than the rumors. Mao Yang said coldly. But this is the corpse of one of our clansmen. How can you deal with it so casually? This was a slap to the Great Phoenix Dragon clan's face in public. Chu Liyue suddenly laughed. Clan leader Mao Yang, although this corpse does belong to a senior of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, it's already mine. It's not up to others to decide what I want to do with it, right? This was something he had told Elder Mao Yao back then. Elder Mao Yao, don't you think so? Mao Yao, who was still burning with anger, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat when he heard this. At this moment, he clearly felt countless gazes filled with reproach and resentment fall on him. Mao Yao stammered and tried to appear fierce. What nonsense are you talking about? When did we say that in the bet? Chu Liyue said with a smile. It seems that you're really forgetful. At that time, we clearly agreed that after I won the bet, this corpse would belong to me, and the Great Phoenix Dragon clan would not pursue it anymore. This naturally means that you no longer have any right to interfere with this matter. There are many witnesses that day. Elder Mao Yao, do you want me to invite a few of them over? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1733. Mao Yao was speechless. Although Chu Liyue's words were unpleasant to hear, it was the truth. Since she had won the bet that day, the skeleton belonged to her. Naturally, it was up to her to decide how to deal with it. Even if it was the skeleton of their Great Phoenix Dragon clan, they still had no right to interfere. At the end of the day, the responsibility for this matter still fell on his head. Whispers came from the surroundings. Elder Mao Yao actually has the nerve to stand up and speak. If he wasn't too incompetent that day and lost the bet, why would we be suffering Shengguanyu's anger for no reason? That's right. Because of a personal mistake, the skeleton of a clansman fell into the hands of others and can't be recovered. This is a big mistake. However, Elder Mao Yao hasn't been punished yet. I really don't know what the clan leader is thinking. Why not? Didn't you see that the clan leader didn't let Elder Mao Yao participate in the 1000 Summit this time? You should know that Elder Mao Yao was an important figure in the previous 1000 Peaks. How can this be? In all these years, there has never been a case where a clansman's skeleton has fallen outside and we have no right to recover it. If not for Elder Mao Yao's negligence this time, we wouldn't have to be so sullen. If I were him, I wouldn't have the face to come to the 1000 Summit today. All kinds of discussions entered Mao Yao's ears one after another, causing his face to turn green and extremely embarrassed. He wished he could find a hole to hide in. He knew that this matter would have a big impact on him, but he wouldn't say it out loud. Even the clan leader Mao Yang didn't reprimand him harshly. He just quietly distributed the power in his hands. Although Mao Yao felt terrible, he knew that this was the last bit of face left for him. As time passed, this matter would naturally fade away. However, he didn't expect Shengguan Yu and Rong Xiu to come. Furthermore, he had taken out the skeleton right in front of them. Wasn't this exposing his background in front of everyone? When these clansmen saw the skeleton, they clearly didn't intend to continue enduring. Mao Yao didn't need to think to know that his days in the clan would be even more difficult. And if Rong Xiu did something to the skeleton, Mao Yao felt that he would become the sinner of the entire race. He almost couldn't catch his breath. His body swayed, and his face was extremely pale. Chu Luyue asked with concern. Elder Mao Yao, your complexion doesn't look too good. Could it be that you haven't fully recovered from your previous injuries? As she spoke, she frowned slightly and revealed a look of confusion. That shouldn't be the case. I was quite restrained back then. Mao Yao's chest tightened and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Restrain? What did she mean by that? Could it be that she had been merciful to him back then? What would everyone think if they heard this? You. Miao Yao was infuriated. This Shengguan Yu is clearly doing this on purpose. Chu Liuyue's smile was gentle and sincere. Do you want to rest first? I see that Patriarch Mao Yang and the others are all here. Even if you leave for a while, it won't have much of an impact, right? Mao Yao's vision turned black, and his body began to tremble. Mao Yang frowned. Mao Yao's appearance was simply too embarrassing. If it weren't for his seniority and his contributions to the clan, he would have been severely held accountable for the skeleton's incident this time. He originally thought that after experiencing this setback, Mao Yao would restrain himself a little. He didn't expect that not only did he not improve at all, he even became even more impatient. Mao Yang lowered his eyes, hiding the cold light in his eyes. Patriarch Mao Yang, don't worry. I want to use these bones to repair the jade disc, but I have no intention of destroying it. Rong Xiu said with a faint smile. This was the Divine Dragon Island, and he wouldn't go so far as to completely offend the great Phoenix Dragon clan here. Hearing this, Mao Yang's tensed face finally relaxed a little. He stared at Rong Xiu for a while, and finally nodded, then please. Within the ruins of God, the originally gloomy and oppressive pressure seemed to have lessened by quite a bit. Dumpling and the rest headed outside at an extremely fast speed. Even the weakest, Chu Ning, could barely keep up with the rest after borrowing Shengguan Jing's divine artifact. Not long after, they arrived at the border of the ruins of God and stood in front of the Scarlet Soul Forest again. With their previous experience and the fact that there were no outsiders to disturb them, they passed through very smoothly this time. In the evening, the group walked out of the Scarlet Soul Forest and completely left the ruins of God. When they took the last step, Shengguan Jing couldn't help but look back. It was already evening, and the afterglow of the setting sun covered the entire Scarlet Soul Forest with a faint layer of golden light. Black trees stood in the forest, and the dark red leaves swayed in the wind. He had never thought that he would actually come here again and completely resolve the grudge between him and Yu Hongshan. He wondered where Yu was now and whether she was safe. At that thought, he retracted his gaze and looked at Dumpling. He wasn't the only one. Everyone else present was also waiting for Dumpling. Out of all of them, she was the only one who could lead them to Rong Xiu and his wife. Dumpling crossed her arms and rested her chin on one hand, deep in thought. After a while, she raised her chubby little hand and pointed in a certain direction. Over there. Without hesitation, they immediately followed Tuanzi and ran forward. Time passed slowly, and it seemed to be especially unbearable. But fortunately, Dumpling and Chu Luiyue had always been sensing each other. This also proved that at the very least, Chu Luiyue should still be safe at this time. And the closer they got, the stronger Dumpling's sensing ability became. The distance between the two parties was obviously shrinking. This made everyone feel more at ease. However, gradually, Yi Zhao and Elder Yu both felt that something was amiss. Elder Yu lowered his head to look. At this moment, they were passing by a wasteland. The terrain here was a little special. On the yellow wasteland, there were ravines crisscrossing. Looking down from the sky, these ravines of varying depth stretched across the boundless wasteland, grand and desolate. This place, Elder Yu finally couldn't help but move to Yi Zhao's side and whisper. "Clan leader, don't you think this place seems a little strange? Ordinary wastelands don't have such scenery." In his impression, there seemed to be only one place in the Divine Ruins world that looked like this. Yi Zhao seemed to have guessed what he was thinking and nodded affirmatively. "You're right. This is indeed the 13 slopes." Although Elder Yu had already expected this, he was still shocked when he heard such an affirmative answer. The so-called 13 slopes referred to this wasteland. It was said that 10,000 years ago, 13 ancestors of the great phoenix dragon had passed away here together. After they died, the energy of heaven and earth here shook, causing this wasteland to become what it was today. Therefore, the descendants called it the 13 slopes. But the key point was, this was the territory of the great phoenix dragon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1734. How did we end up here? Elder Yu's expression froze, and he was a little worried. The relationship between the two ancient divine beast clans had always been very subtle. They were on opposite sides, but they had never really fought. They were polite, but they were not willing to submit to each other. They had been fighting openly and secretly for many years. However, there was always an unwritten rule between them: they would never cause trouble in each other's territory. This was the bottom line of both sides. Once someone broke it, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. If those old guys from the Great Phoenix Dragon knew that they were here, there would be a lot of trouble. This was also one of the reasons why Elder Yu felt uneasy. He looked up at Dumpling, who was in front of him. She seemed to be unaware and still looked excited. "If we continue forward, I'm afraid we will reach Divine Dragon Island, right?" Elder Yu was very worried. He had never been to Divine Dragon Island, but they had already arrived at the 13th slope. He knew that the great phoenix dragon's nest was in front of them. Yi Zhao's brows moved slightly. The 13th slope is only considered the periphery of Divine Dragon Island. It's not considered a violation of the agreement. However, we can't go any further. Especially when he had come here with EU. If the great phoenix dragon and the others knew about this, who knew what they would say about them? Dumpling. Yi Zhao suddenly called out to Dumpling. Dumpling stopped and turned back, only to see Yi Zhao and Elder Yu standing on the spot. "Grandpa leader, what's wrong?" Dumpling asked in confusion. Shengguan Jing and the others also stopped and turned back when they heard the commotion. Yi Zhao stared at Dumpling for a while and asked. "Dumpling, are you sure that Shengguan Yu is in front?" Dumpling nodded in confusion. "Yes. Hadn't everyone been following her all this time? Why did Grandpa Leader suddenly ask about this?" Yi Zhao paused. Shengguan Jing saw that his expression was a little strange and could not help but ask. "Leader Yi Zhao, is there something wrong?" Yi Zhao shook his head. It's nothing. However, you and I are unable to continue forward. We can only send Dumpling here. Shengguan Jing and the others were shocked. Dumpling also widened her eyes and asked in puzzlement, "What are you talking about? Grandpa Patriarch, why?" Yi Zhao raised his hand and pointed downwards. This is the 13 slopes. It's considered the territory of the great phoenix dragon race. If they passed through here, it was very likely that the divine dragon island would be in front of them. You and I have special statuses. Naturally, we can't go further in. When he said that, everyone looked at each other. If that was the case, then there was really no other way. Dumpling pursed her lips in disappointment and reluctance. Although she hadn't spent a lot of time with Grandpa Patriarch and Grandpa Fifth Elder, she could feel that they were genuinely good to her. Now that they were suddenly separated, she naturally felt a little upset. She scratched her hair bun. When Dumpling finds you, I'll go back to visit you and Grandpa Fifth Elder. Yi Zhao looked at her sincere and clean big eyes, as well as her solemn vow, and his heart warmed. Okay. Then Grandpa Patriarch will wait for you. Elder EU was so touched that tears welled up in his eyes. He hurriedly said, Me too, me too. Grandpa Fifth Elder will definitely wait for you. If you want to see Grandpa Fifth Elder, just send a message over. No matter where Dumpling is, Grandpa Fifth Elder will definitely be at your beck and call. His words finally made Dumpling burst with joy, and a bright smile bloomed on her face again. It's a deal. After that, Yi Zhao and Elder EU coaxed Dumpling for a while more before they really bade farewell and watched Dumpling and the others leave. Looking at Dumpling's gradually disappearing figure, Elder EU couldn't help but ask, Patriarch, can you really be at ease? After all, Dumpling is the young lord. Once she enters Divine Dragon Island, her aura will definitely be detected. What if those people from Divine Dragon Island make things difficult for Dumpling? Yi Zhao's face was expressionless. We have to be at ease even if we can't. If we really go, things will only become more troublesome. Therefore, they could only make such a choice. As long as Dumpling goes, they will definitely make things difficult for her. Fortunately, Dumpling is still young, and she has a contractual relationship with Shengguan. If she wants to go to Shanghai, there is no better reason than that. Even if they want to do something to Dumpling, they have to think of a suitable reason to do so. Originally, they had been brooding over the fact that Dumpling had a contractual relationship with Shengguan. However, from the looks of it today, it wasn't all bad. Elder EU's heart finally calmed down a little. Now, we can only hope that everything goes well for Dumpling and the others. Yi Zhao was silent for a moment before he spoke again. That Rong Xiao. Do you know what his background is? Elder EU didn't expect him to suddenly bring this up. After being stunned for a moment, he said, Don't you already know this? He is the saint of Yuntian Tower. Yi Zhao shook his head. What I mean is... other identities. Elder EU suddenly thought of something. Are you suspicious of Rong Xiao because of Nan Yifan's reaction earlier? Yi Zhao nodded. There was nothing to deny about this. He did feel that Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rong Xiao was very strange. The Nan family's power was stronger than Yuntian Tower. As the head of the family, Nan Yifan had no reason to be so afraid of Rong Xiao. This. I really don't know. Rong Xiao has been famous in Yuntian Tower for the past few years, but I don't think I've heard that he has any other background other than being the saint of Yuntian Tower. Why don't I go back and look into it? Elder EU asked tentatively. Yi Zhao was about to nod when he suddenly paused, as if he was hesitating about something. After pondering for a long time, he waved his hand. Forget it. Since he didn't say anything, we don't have to deliberately inquire. These things will naturally be known when it's time to know. He took one last look in the direction where Dumpling and the others left. Those figures had completely disappeared from his sight. A breeze blew, fluttering the corners of the two's clothes. Yi Zhao lowered his eyes, hiding the emotions in his eyes, and turned around. It's time for us to go back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.